This notorious gang of robbers uses their cute appearance to beg from wealthy people. However, this time, the little girl was rejected and was thrown to the ground by the person. The intense pain unexpectedly awakened her memories of a past life. She suddenly became aware this noble person before her was actually searching for a serial killer in the crowd. She knew the killer was wearing a red hat and was hiding among the people. Once this noble person leaves, the killer would go to the slums and celebrate his escape by taking the lives of over 30 innocent people. The first victim would be her good friend, so she immediately grabbed the noble's black cloak. You can't go to the train station. The person with the red hat just now was acting suspiciously. He's only pretending to go to the train station. He actually sneaked into an alley. He looks exactly like the killer on the wanted poster. The little girl repeated under pressure. The Duke would rather kill an innocent than let one guilty person escape. He suddenly used black magic to bring the previously smug killer under his leather shoe and raised his golden cane high. My greatest pleasure in life is to personally kill bastards like you. Soon the cane was covered in blood, its original color no longer visible. The screams also abruptly stopped. The Duke casually brushed up his bangs. The little girl watched in terror. I need to escape quickly, otherwise I can't explain all this. But the next second, the man used his large black hand to lift the little girl into the air. She was so frightened she trembled, unable to utter a plea for mercy. Just then, a group of patrolling police appeared nearby. There were no screams just now. The Duke realized this wasn't a good time to talk. He gave the little girl a golden card. My name is Gadon. I want to talk to you about the information you just provided. Remember to come find me. Understood? Then he vanished into black smoke. The little girl didn't know that from now on, her life would depend entirely on this noble person. The little beggar had done the Duke a great favor, yet asked for nothing in return. She only wanted to stay at the Duke's mansion as a hard-working little maid. At least she wouldn't have to sleep on the streets covered in newspapers. She talked endlessly about her good qualities. I may be young, but I'm very healthy, and I'm very frugal with food. I only need to eat once a day. I'm also good at mopping floors and doing laundry. Oh, and I'm small, so I can even climb into chimneys to clean them. But everyone remained silent, afraid the Duke's people might misunderstand. She gestured wildly, explaining that although she usually slept on the streets, the alley where she slept was very clean. She definitely didn't have any contagious diseases. The Duke's sister asked with a puzzled look, since my brother owes you a favor, you could have asked for a better reward. Why choose to be a maid? The little beggar lowered her head, clutching her tattered clothes. Because I just want to be ordinary. I only hope that when I walk on the streets during the day, I won't be beaten or scolded. The Duke's sister's heart melted. She patted the little beggar's head, comforting her. Then what are your salary requirements? The little beggar's eyes sparkled. Does this mean you're accepting me? Whatever you want to give is fine. How about 1/4 of an adult salary? How does that sound? No one answered her. The little beggar carefully added, then half of that is fine too. Just then, the Duke asked from his lofty position, how did you know I was chasing the fugitive William at that time? The little beggar was prepared, as if rehearsing for an interview question, because the person I saw in the alley looked just like the criminal on the wanted poster. The Duke nodded, affirming the little beggar's keen observation skills. Then he asked, but among so many people, why did you choose to ask me for help? The little beggar opened her innocent big eyes. She absolutely couldn't say she had read this book and knew everything that would happen. She played dumb. It was just by chance. I was just looking for someone who could help. And you looked very handsome. You stood out in the crowd. But I didn't know you were a nobleman. This answer was indeed plausible for a child. The Duke asked again, then how did you know I was going to the train station? This question didn't stump the clever little beggar. A well-dressed gentleman, hurrying through a dirty alley. There's only one reason. You must have wanted to quickly get to the train station in front of the district. And that alley was a shortcut to the train station. The little beggar thought to herself, does becoming a maid require answering so many questions? She silently prayed. I don't aspire to be a cleaning maid or work in the kitchen. Even if I'm asked to watch the stables, I can accept that. But the Duke coldly announced, we're no longer hiring maids. The little beggar lowered her head in disappointment. However, I'll give you 5 gold coins a week. This sudden wealth made the little beggar feel uneasy. The Duke wouldn't want to turn me into a collectible, would he? But the next second, the Duke calmly asked, would you like to be my adopted daughter? The little beggar's mind short-circuited for a moment. What kind of maid's job is an adopted daughter? The Duke's sister sitting nearby burst into laughter. The little beggar, with her wit, helped the Duke find the real culprit. She had hoped to use this opportunity to stay at the Duke's mansion as a maid, not seeking great wealth, just wanting a job to earn money. Who knew the Duke would say, "Be my daughter"? The little beggar didn't quite understand. "Excuse me, what kind of maid's job is Miss Young responsible for?" The Duke lowered his head, lifting a strand of the little beggar's hair. "She's malnourished. We must nourish her well." He continued to coax the little beggar. "You're still young. I can't make you work, but I can't bear to see you continue living on the streets. So just stay here." The little beggar actually understood. If she became the Duke's daughter, she would become the most noble young lady in the kingdom. But at the same time, she would have to enter this blood-stained Duke's mansion. Although unsure if it was fortunate or unfortunate, she was willing to seize this opportunity. Perhaps this was a turning point in her life. The little beggar nodded firmly. The Duke sighed in relief. Abduction successful. He asked the butler to take the little beggar to get cleaned up. The Duke's sister thought it was absurd. "Just like that? Brother, do you even know this child's name?" The little beggar also realized belatedly. She regretfully clapped her hands. "My name is Lei. It's the name my mother gave me." Taken to the bathroom by the maid, Lei looked around the bathroom in disbelief. So luxurious, even bigger than the reception room from earlier. She called out to the retreating butler. "Can I ask you a question?" The butler was a bit embarrassed. "You can ask me after your bath." But Lei was persistent. "I just want to ask one thing. The Duke wanting me to be his adopted daughter, what does that mean?" The butler calmly replied, "It means you're about to become the young mistress here." Still confused. Why would the Duke let an orphan like me into his family? What will I have to do in the future? The butler understood. Lei was a very smart child. He didn't hide anything. Although nobles rarely adopt children, it's not completely without precedent. Some families adopt children to give their only child a playmate. Of course, some do it for charity. They bring orphans home and nurture them into talented individuals. He told Lei, "Young miss, if you can eventually gain the approval of other nobles, people will endlessly praise the Duke's kindness in adopting you." The little one thought for a moment. So the best way to repay the Duke was to become an excellent person. In this terrible world where murderers run rampant, I, weak and helpless, could only end up on the streets, living by begging. But at the Duke's mansion, I can solve the problem of food and shelter, and also receive an education. She convinced herself this way. Even if the Duke's adoption is just an act of charity, I should be grateful. Weighing 30 pounds, of which 10 pounds were just dirt on her body. Before bathing, her hair was black. After washing, she discovered that her hair was actually golden brown. The little beggar looked at the murky bathwater. Her face turned red with embarrassment. "I'm sorry I made the bathtub dirty." The maid shook her head. "From now on, you're the young lady of the Duke's family. No need to be so polite." The little girl lowered her head, clutching the towel. She couldn't believe such soft fabric was just for drying the body. She lifted her dress and twirled curiously. The maids all exclaimed how cute she was with every move. The head maid called her, "Young miss, your meal is ready in the dining room." She arrived at the luxurious dining room. The table was full of delicious food and wine glasses, but no one was there. She randomly chose a seat. The small, thin girl struggled to climb onto the chair. Looking at the roast meat in front of her, she marveled that it must be delicious. Her stomach made gurgling noises. Though the hungry little girl had been homeless for many years, she knew what politeness was. She had to wait for everyone to be seated before starting. 20 minutes passed. Saliva was almost dripping from the corner of her mouth. The dining room was still empty. She was so hungry her eyes were glazed over, almost like a zombie craving human flesh. Picking up a soft, cloud-like piece of bread, the girl thought, "It should be okay if I just eat a little." She took a small bite. The milky bread almost made her dance with joy. She then grabbed a chicken. "Wow, this is also delicious. So good it makes me want to cry." She ate with great appetite, completely unaware that a boy had appeared beside her. "You're small, but you can eat quite a lot." The girl was so startled she dropped the chicken leg. "When did he get here?" The other person, unabashed, said, "You're sitting in my seat." Frightened on her first day at the Duke's house, the little beggar immediately stood up to apologize. "I'm sorry," but she stumbled and almost fell face first onto the table. The boy quickly hugged her. He steadily placed the dazed little one on the chair, showing a very brotherly manner. Then he returned to the seat next to the girl. Your seat is right across from me. You can sit there from now on. The brother was kinder than she had imagined, but she still didn't dare look at him. The boy was very curious about his new sister. He leaned in to smell his sister's pink hair. Is it strawberry scented because it's pink? The little girl honestly replied, it's the scent of soap. Looking at the empty plate in front of her, the girl, curling her toes in embarrassment, said, I'm sorry, I ate all your food. When I used to beg before, even if it was just a small piece of stale bread, we would all share it. That's what sharing between friends is. But now, with a table full of delicious food, I only thought of myself. The girl felt very guilty. I really wanted to be friends with you, but now you'll just think I'm a glutton. The brother didn't think that at all. Don't overthink it. I didn't interrupt you because you looked so cute while eating. Your cheeks were all puffed up, just like the cat I used to have. He recalled that cute cat. Whenever it saw food, it would go crazy and could always eat a lot. The brother experimented on the cat. The sister's hands trembled in fear upon hearing this. I won't be turned into a specimen too, will I? The brother very seriously described the experiment process. First, I changed its living environment. At first, it was a bit listless, so I put it in a warm place. I changed its bed and even gave it medicine. But its time had come, so in the end, it still died. The sister realized this wasn't a cruel experiment, but rather the brother's devoted care. He wasn't as cold-blooded as she had imagined. She smiled sweetly. That cat must have been very grateful for your experiment. But the brother was curious about this new family member. Why do you want to be friends with me? Lei answered seriously. It's because of you that I can stay here. I'm very grateful to you. The boy's expression remained indifferent. That was my father's decision. Lei shook her head. Don't think I don't understand. If you didn't agree, the Duke would still have sent me away. After all, you're also the Duke's treasure. The boy thought for a moment, but siblings can't be friends. Lei lowered her head dejectedly. The brother couldn't bear to see her upset, but we can still get along well. Your eating style is really interesting. Lei didn't know how to explain. I won't do that again in the future. Actually, normally I eat. The brother was very curious. Why would father adopt a little beggar? Have you killed someone or done something bad? Lei shook her head vigorously. She was so weak. Who could she possibly threaten? Speaking of doing bad things, Lei remembered being falsely accused of stealing a wallet. At that time, she tried hard to explain that she had just found the wallet and was waiting for the owner. But the owner beat her violently and called her a thief. Lei was in so much pain she almost died, but she calmly told her brother, I was just slapped a few times. The brother was a bit angry, since you were wrongly accused. Then the person who slapped you is the bad guy. Do you remember what he looks like? The little girl shook her head. That was a long time ago. The next second, the brother smiled innocently. When you remember, tell me. I'll help you twist that person's head off. The little one was startled. Although she said she'd definitely tell her brother when she remembered, in reality, she thought that even if she did remember, she absolutely couldn't tell him. He is perfect. The Duke is handsome, attractive, and wealthy, but he enjoys the thrill of killing, especially killing those social parasites, preferably torturing them in every way before they die, making them experience the pre-death despair of innocent victims, trampling this psychopathic killer underfoot, grinding hard with his shoes. I heard you killed over 30 people and collected parts of the victims' organs. The Duke's tone was icy as he asked the butler, have those collections been returned to the victims' families? The butler answered that they had. He sneered, why don't we cut you into 30 pieces and send them along with those collections to the victims' families? The butler thoughtfully put black gloves on the Duke. My lord, that is indeed a perfect punishment method. The little beggar became the Duke's adopted daughter. She woke up on a 100 square meter luxurious bed. She pinched her cheeks. It wasn't a dream after all. Putting on clean clothes, she energetically greeted her brother, sitting across from her brother for meals. She glanced at the empty main seat. The Duke seemed to be absent again today. Her brother replied, Father is always very busy. He probably went to inspect the territory today. Lei didn't expose her brother's lie. Inspect the territory. It was clearly an excuse the Duke made up to cover his tracks when he went to kill someone. I better not ask too much. But eating alone with her brother for several days in a row, being stared at intently by her brother, Lei was a bit worried she might get indigestion, but her hands didn't stop moving. Her brother joked, you should learn some table manners. Chew slowly, okay? Lei wiped her mouth. I understand. Brother, do you have time to play with me today? He shook his head. I have to go to the academy today. Seeing his sister's disappointed expression, the brother glanced at the butler. The latter pulled out a yellow balloon from Doraemon's pocket. Lay's eyes instantly lit up. Is this for me? Didn't you say balloons were only for special days? She was so happy she started crying. The brother sat beside her worriedly. You're crying again. I didn't expect you'd be so happy over a balloon. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to pat his sister's fluffy head. Lay was touched. Thank you for the gift. I'll always keep it with me. The butler also came forward and poured a cup of sweet milk tea for the little one. A warm room, gifts from family, delicious food. Being able to start a new day like this is just perfect. Lay squinted her eyes, wanting to forever remember this moment of happiness in her heart. Auntie is a holy maiden of the temple, as quiet as a virgin. But when it comes to her newly adopted little niece, she moves like a startled rabbit, her carriage not taking the proper route, but a shortcut instead, stopping in front of her niece in the shortest time possible, then making a dazzling entrance, feigning surprise. Oh my, it's Lay. I never thought we'd run into each other here. The butler helplessly commented. It was clearly your carriage rushing towards us. Annie completely ignored him and abruptly changed the subject. Now, everyone outside is talking about my brother adopting a girl. The butler was a bit upset. So quickly? We had already forbidden the newspapers from reporting it. Annie covered her mouth with a fan, smiling meaningfully. The speed of gossip among the masses is faster than newspaper circulation. After all, every move of the Empire's most handsome man, my brother the Duke, affects the nerves of every young lady. Annie bent down to look at her little niece beside the butler's leg. Oh my, this dress seems a bit big, and the style is outdated too. Lay was satisfied. Isn't it pretty enough? Annie pouted. I knew it would be like this. We finally have an adorable little one in the family. How could they not prepare anything for her? Hearing that her brother wasn't home, Annie smiled brightly. Then I'll take my little niece away first. Ignoring the butler's objections, she forcibly took the adorable beauty away. And she even made her change how she addressed her. Don't call me madam, call me Mariana. In the carriage, Annie couldn't stop praising her little niece. When I saw you last time, I thought you were very cute. Seeing you again, I feel like you've become even prettier. Hugging the balloon her brother gave her, Lay blushed at the compliments. Lady Mariana, you're the real beauty. Annie was delighted. The little one is so sweet-tongued. Then she took out her fairy happy smoke. Lay was so shocked her mouth couldn't close. Annie, you're a holy maiden. Seeing her little niece covering her nose, Annie quickly extinguished it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't smoke in front of you. Then she gently patted Lay's little head. The carriage arrived at the city center. Lay stared intently at the toy store outside the window. For her former self, being able to look at the toy store from afar was already satisfying enough. Because as soon as they got close to the store entrance, the owner would chase away the little beggars. Lay remembered one time when the owner forgot to turn off the window lights while closing the store. When he sneaked there to look in the early morning, the scene before his eyes made him feel as if he was in heaven. That day, Lay stood in front of the window display for the entire night. Now Lay was thinking, since she's here with her aunt, would she be able to go into the toy store? Being patted by her aunt's warm hand felt so comfortable, she wanted to roll around. She had a cool aunt whose essential job was being a leftover woman. But that didn't stop her aunt from smoking, drinking, and getting perms. Annie didn't have many noble interests. When she was happy, she'd just buy things with her filthy money. As soon as they entered the clothing store, 3 salespeople rushed to serve them. The big spender must be well served. But today, Annie wasn't buying clothes for herself. She wanted to order clothes for the little carrot head hiding behind her. The little niece shyly greeted them. The salespeople were very nervous. So this was the recent center of gossip, the Duke's adopted daughter. She sensitively noticed the unfriendly glances from the salespeople, quietly hiding her body behind her aunt. Auntie noticed this, her aura changing from gentle to menacing. I want to see how you plan to earn this money. But the little niece nervously grabbed her aunt's skirt. No, that's too much. Annie was unconcerned. For your first time shopping, you should spend this much. Don't worry about it. The girl was so anxious she almost cried. What if I spend too much money and the Duke kicks me out of the house? She didn't notice at all that the enthusiastic salespeople had already pounced on her and even took away the balloon in her hand. We'll keep this safe for you. Lay was a bit reluctant, but this is from my brother. What if it flies away? But the salespeople were too enthusiastic and directly dragged Lay away. Colorful fabrics were draped over the little girl's body. But Annie shook her head, unsatisfied. Do you have anything more expensive? These don't suit her status as a Duke's daughter at all. And these styles are already outdated. Are you going to dress such an adorable child in old-fashioned clothes? Lei crouched on the chair, small, pitiful, and helpless. Annie finally liked a dress. Lei didn't dare delay and followed the saleswoman into the fitting room. Only then did she realize the dress she was wearing was actually a princess dress. She was so scared she didn't dare breathe. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from next door. "Don't touch me. Let my maid serve me instead." Then came a sour complaint. "I really don't understand the Duke. I'm almost about to become the Duchess. Yet he picked up a wild girl as his adopted daughter. That girl isn't like young Master Jet at all, who has the bloodline of a dark mage." Lei lowered her head dejectedly. Then she heard the young lady say, "Education is also a headache. How can we teach her to be presentable?" The sycophant maid suggested, "You could arrange her marriage early and send her to the countryside." The blonde young lady snickered. "That's not a bad idea. She'd better be good-looking, or who would want to marry an ugly woman? If she turns out to be ugly, we can just sell her to the circus." Lei heard all these malicious words. Actually, she had seen many people like this when she was a little beggar. They would always look at her with disdainful eyes. She consoled herself in her heart, "It's okay. I don't care." Annie had been waiting outside the door for a long time. Her praise instantly swept away all of Lei's gloom. Her brother gave her an inexpensive balloon. She held it tightly in her arms and promised to take it to her grave. But as soon as she entered the clothing store, it was taken away by the staff. Although the balloon was tied securely to the window, she was still worried. The balloon was the first gift she had ever received in her life. She looked up the check again. In the blink of an eye, the balloon had disappeared. The window was open. She rushed out the door, disregarding her elegant dress. But looking around, there was no trace of the balloon. She lowered her head in disappointment. At this moment, a hand from deep in the alley reached out towards the child's tender body. "Young lady, you look like you're from a noble family. Would you like your fortune told? Your hair color is so beautiful." Then that hand grabbed her. She felt goosebumps all over her body. The damp and cold touch made Lei back away repeatedly. She quickly turned and ran while the other person wasn't paying attention. Thanks to years of living on the streets, her escape speed was quite fast. Panting, she shook off the pursuer by 3 blocks. She leaned against the wall to rest, only to realize that before her was the antique toy store she had longed for. This used to be her heaven, but now she no longer coveted these toys, because the balloon her brother gave her was more precious. Lei suddenly realized that she had accidentally left the clothing store wearing the unpaid dress. She pushed through the crowd, thinking she should hurry back, but she got lost instead. Lei cried silently on the street. "What should I do?" Suddenly, a familiar dark shadow flashed before her eyes, catching her attention. It was the aura belonging to the Duke. The next moment, the Duke stepped out of the carriage in his shiny leather shoes. He joked, "You've run away from home so quickly." Looking her up and down, the Duke made sure she was unharmed. So he hugged the little one and comforted her. The little one nervously explained how she got lost. Then she asked, "How did you recognize me? The last time you saw me, I was so messy." Usually cold to others, the Duke now gently praised me. "I saw an angel standing by the road. Upon closer look, it turned out to be you." The little one blushed, thinking to herself, as expected of a noble, he's so good with words. The Duke carried Lei back to the clothing store. The staff rushed out anxiously. "Young miss, we were terrified when you suddenly disappeared. If we couldn't find you, we were about to call the police." The staff hurriedly apologized. "A customer just asked to open the window for ventilation. That's why your balloon flew away." The culprit who bullied Lei now appeared before the Duke with a coy expression, feigning weakness. "Duke, we haven't seen each other for a while. By the way, who is this child?" He spoke gently to the adopted girl. "From now on, we're family." But she tightly covered her nose and mouth with a fan, disgusted by the non-existent poor smell on the girl. The girl was sensitive. She knew her adoptive mother didn't like her. When the Duke wasn't around, she heard her adoptive mother say she wanted to sell her to the circus. But in front of the Duke, the adoptive mother considerately suggested for her, "Have you found a good tutor for her? I know a very strict teacher. Sometimes he even uses physical punishment to educate children. If that teacher teaches her, she'll definitely be transformed." She deliberately tapped her fan loudly, making the girl's face turn pale. The Duke said nothing, just put Lei on the chair. He inexplicably asked, "Who am I?" Lei tilted her head. "You're the Duke." The Duke was dissatisfied. "No, I'm your father. Call me Dad." Lei's face instantly turned red with embarrassment. She couldn't utter those 2 words. The adoptive mother watched impatiently from the side. The relationship between this father and daughter seemed better than she imagined. Suddenly the Duke said to me, "Do me a favor. Help me tell this woman to get out right now." The adoptive mother was suddenly alarmed, pretending to be confused. What do you mean? The Duke cruelly repeated. Don't you understand what I'm saying? I mean, disappear from my sight immediately, and don't ever appear before me again from today on. To put it more bluntly, get out now. You should understand now, right? The adoptive mother fainted directly into the maid's arms, her lips trembling with anger, as if not recognizing this heartless man. However, Lei felt that this was the Duke's true nature. A crook cheating another crook isn't a good person at all. But taking pleasure in others' misfortune, she seemed quite bad herself. She looked at Yang sympathetically, not Miss Roger anymore, sighing inwardly. How pitiful. The Duke also whispered in her ear, Child, say goodbye to Roger. You'll never see her again. The little one said in a sweet voice, stating the cruel fact. Goodbye, Auntie. The Duke was very pleased, repeatedly patting his obedient daughter's head. Good girl. Etiquette can be learned slowly. Gradually, you'll become more and more like a noble lady. Lei used her small hands to fix her hair, messed up by the Duke. Then she gave Roger one last remark. I'm glad I'm not as beautiful as you. If I were as beautiful as you, I'd have to marry early, right? Or I might even be sold to the circus. Roger, beautiful but angry, blurted out, You dare to eavesdrop on me? She directly admitted that she had talked about selling her adopted daughter. The Duke stood in front of Lei. Don't you understand what get out means? Roger, having lost love, completely lost her mind. This isn't your mansion to kick me out of. The Duke sighed deeply. Don't you know I've bought this entire street? The spoiled Roger started to act coy and innocent again. Duke, weren't we dating? How can you say such things? The next second, the Duke held her hand, giving Roger renewed confidence. But the Duke just led her by the hand and threw her out the door. We only had a few meals together. How can that be considered dating? You're too presumptuous. If you really want to think that way, then just consider it as you dumping me. Please leave before I call the guards to make you disappear. The brother severely criticized his sister. You're wearing this dress for the second time. Has our family become this poor? Seeing that her brother was about to nag endlessly, she quickly moved forward to stop him. Stop, don't say any more. This made him lose face in front of his little niece. He then pointed to the mountain of shopping bags, proudly saying those were all he bought for his little niece. Lei suddenly felt immense pressure. Having just arrived in this family, she wasn't used to this way of spending money. But the Duke and his sister ignored Lei completely. The Duke asked his sister how much she spent in total. Hearing it was only 100 gold coins, the Duke was very dissatisfied. Don't you know how to spend money? These silks and jewels aren't good enough. You should have asked for their most expensive items. Silk. Lei was scared and broke out in a cold sweat, hurriedly declining these high-end fabrics. Actually, I'm fine wearing Annie's childhood clothes. Don't we have 5 sets at home? Annie didn't understand. Just 5 sets of clothes? That won't even fill up the wardrobe. The Duke also smiled, patting Lei's head. Little one, don't worry about how we adults spend money. Then he continued discussing Lei's clothes. You've only prepared 20 sets of clothes? Not enough. Tell them to bring everything for us to see. Only Lei was anxiously stomping her feet. Don't these adults know how to save money? With no other choice, she had to use her trump card. She pretended to be dizzy. Oh, I'm so tired. I can't even open my eyes. How can I try on clothes? The Duke sighed. Then there's no choice. You all put the remaining clothes back. Lei secretly showed a smug little expression. He had worked at the clothing store entrance. Annie lifted her skirt and got into the carriage. She didn't forget to remind Lei, next time you must play with Annie again. Remember? The Duke was very unhappy. No, you don't know how to take care of children at all. Without my permission, you can't take her out. Annie didn't care. Sitting in the departing carriage, she still reluctantly poked her head out of the window. Goodbye. Next time you must call me Mariana. And what my brother said, just ignore it. Lei and the Duke also prepared to get into the carriage to go home. The little one was still worried. The balloon her brother gave her was lost. How should she explain it to her brother? Just then, a red-haired woman suddenly appeared behind them. With a pale face, she reached out her hand. Please help me. After saying this, she collapsed. The Duke instinctively reached out to protect Lei. In her impression, brother was cold-blooded. Father was unsympathetic, but since she came to this family, brother had changed. He would sit on the stairs waiting for his sister to come home and eat together. Father also always teased her, saying she looked as cute as an angel shining in the crowd. Father specially came to pick up his daughter, but joked with the butler that this daughter was picked up on the roadside. How did father change from an ice princess to a funny man? She was a bit confused, but when she saw her brother, she lowered her head guiltily. I'm sorry, brother. I lost the first balloon you gave me." She explained the process of losing it bit by bit. Brother listened patiently, meanwhile admiring his sister's pitiful tears. Then he patted her fluffy little head to comfort her. "We can buy another balloon if it's lost. Why cry over such a small thing? Did you like that balloon so much?" Seeing his sister was still upset, brother took the initiative this time. "When I have time, I'll take you boating to cheer you up." Lei looked up in disbelief. "Isn't brother very busy? And when did he learn to comfort people?" Even more unexpected was that brother reached out his hand and said, "Let's go. I'll take you back to your room." She still remembered the first day she came to the family. Her brother seemed very reluctant. Compared to his current sister complex, he was like a completely different person. Lei wiped her tears forcefully. She smiled brightly. A comfortable hot bath relieved her nervous emotions. Sitting together with her brother and father, listening to music from the phonograph. Father and brother were both drinking red wine. She curiously asked her brother how old he was, and got the answer of 14 years old. Lei's mouth gaped open in exhaustion. "I thought you were 17. Can you drink red wine? After all, you're not an adult yet." Brother waved his hand. "It's fine. Our family is addicted to medicine and alcohol." "Not small at all," the kid was about to say. "Then I also," when father quickly stopped her. "No, you're still too young. Wait until you're half as tall as your brother. Then we'll talk." Lei pondered, touching her own head. Father and brother were curious about what she was doing. Lei smiled happily, "Because touching my head will make me grow faster." If this little beggar hadn't been adopted by the Duke, her original fate would have been to be tricked and locked in a cage, then have her left arm cut off and die from blood loss. But now she was sitting on the soft sofa in the Duke's mansion. Knowing her original fate, her back felt cold, and her hands nervously gripped her dress. Father, brother, and the butler all surrounded her, looking at her with concern. When she learned that today was August 9th, Lei became even more nervous. She tightly gripped her hand that had been grabbed by the trickster, her little face pale. So today was the day she was supposed to be killed. Lei didn't want to keep living in fear like this. She had to actively find the killer. She remembered that the murderer liked to target women with red hair, so she grabbed the Duke's sleeve. "Your Grace, those cases you mentioned earlier, if they were premeditated murders, would there be other commonalities? For example, did those women all like fortune-telling or something?" The Duke didn't understand. Why would she think of fortune-telling? The little one's expression was serious. Because fortune-telling shops are almost all in the slums. Even nobles would visit famous fortune-tellers. People usually go to restaurants or clothing stores that match their status. But only fortune-telling places gather people from all walks of life. The Duke suddenly had a breakthrough in his thinking. He called the butler, preparing to investigate further. Lei covered her mouth. Her spirit, tormented, finally couldn't hold on anymore. She collapsed on the sofa. Once again, she dreamed of her original fate. That serial killer put on a red wig and a woman's ring, sawed off his left arm. Lei's green pupils lost their luster. He didn't even dare to cry out in pain. Silently clenching his fist, he thought it would be better to just kill him. At that moment, the Duke appeared. He used black magic to tightly bind the murderer. Then he opened the cage and hugged the poor Lei. Just as he was about to take him to see a doctor, an arrow pierced the Duke's heart. Lei watched helplessly as the one who saved him fell before his eyes. And the mastermind who tortured him, stroking his chin with an evil smile, made him sick to his scalp. Waking up from the dream, Lei didn't think it was just an empty dream. His whole body was like soaked in water, covered in cold sweat. Finally, trembling, he couldn't say a word. The Duke sat beside him, patting his thin shoulders to comfort him. "Are you all right?" Lei covered his mouth, feeling nauseous, his face ashen, thinking, so I'm not the only one involved in this case. If the Duke goes to investigate the case, he will fall into a coma after being shot by a poisoned arrow. Although later, the country's most famous doctors and priests would treat him, he would still remain in a coma. The Duke was looking at documents. His little daughter grabbed his arm, crying with teary eyes, and begged him in a worried tone. "Your Grace, please, I beg you, don't go after the murderer, okay?" After acting coy, the little girl was immediately disgusted by her own sweet tone, shaking all over. The Duke was also shocked, with a huge question mark over his head. The documents fell directly to the ground. He wasn't being unreasonable, but he knew the Duke's fate. If he goes to find the serial killer, he will be struck in the heart by a poisoned arrow. Lei cried her eyes into Kiwi's, saying, "I dreamed that your Grace was seriously injured. My dreams are usually very accurate, so I'm really scared now. Can you stay with me?" even if it's just for tonight. She carefully observed and found that everyone was silent. She hoped that her willfulness this time would draw everyone's attention. Unexpectedly, the Duke actually nodded and agreed. All right, I'll stay home tonight. After all, calming you down is the most important thing right now. Lei wiped away her tears and asked, "Aren't you angry? Won't you throw me out for being willful?" Hearing the Duke's gentle reply, "No, I won't," Lei felt the weight in her heart finally lift. She couldn't hold back anymore and started crying. Her brother gently stroked her head. "Cry, baby, don't cry." But the more she was comforted, the harder Lei cried. Finally, she cried until she started coughing. The Duke forcefully pointed at the butler. "Quick, bring some sedatives." The butler immediately flash-stepped to the door. The brother gently patted the uncomfortable Lei. After a while, the little one's face was very red. What had she just done? Especially with her brother staring at her intently, afraid that something might happen to her. Just then, the butler came in with the medicine. The cup was still the same color as Lei's hair, but he didn't want to drink it. The white-haired man said it would be fine as long as the Duke stayed by his side. The cunning butler said, "If you're scared, you'll obey. Didn't you feel nauseous and sick to your stomach just now? If you hurt your digestive system, you'll need surgery to open up your belly. Do you want surgery?" Gripping the cup tightly, Lei nervously lowered his head. "I'll never have surgery in this lifetime." So he drank the medicine in one gulp. It was so bitter he almost threw up again, but the butler gently wiped the corners of his mouth. His brother quickly took out a candy. Lei was cared for meticulously. Embarrassed, he said, "I can do it myself." The Duke didn't forget to tease him. "But you just can't sleep alone." Lei suddenly became energetic and said, "No, I want to stay by your side all day today." His little hands clapped forcefully. The Duke was somehow amused by Lei's behavior. "Was that cute gesture just now threatening me? And we're not blood-related. Yet you're so clingy to me. It's really wonderful." The Duke patted the blanket. "Go to sleep." But Lei shook his head firmly. "No, I'm not sleepy at all. If he falls asleep, Dad will leave to find the serial killer's culprit. For Dad's safety." He threw a wild tantrum, deliberately being willful, insisting that Dad sleep with him. After achieving his goal, he struggled against sleep. "Tonight, I absolutely can't let my guard down." But when Dad lay on the bed, propping up his head, saying, "I'll sleep with you," the little one compromised, but he still seriously declared, "I'm just lying down. I won't fall asleep." Dad smiled and then called out, "Son Jed, you lie down too." At first, brother refused, but seeing his sister's eyes glowing with expectation, he couldn't help but lie down too. Lei felt so happy. With brother and dad sleeping with her, she surely wouldn't have nightmares. As the room lights went off, Lei stared at the ceiling thinking, "We really look like a family like this. What exactly is an adopted daughter? Can I treat them as my real family?" As she thought about it, she started to feel drowsy. Lei was still puzzled. "How strange. I was so energetic just now." Her brother reminded her, "Did you forget you just took medicine?" Dad also gently patted her back. With the rhythmic patting, Lei yawned continuously. She realized she had been tricked by Dad and brother. In the last second before falling asleep, she kept mumbling to Dad, "You won't go anywhere else, right? Don't leave me here just because I fell asleep." In the final moment before drifting into dreams, she optimistically thought, "Tomorrow when I wake up, I'll go to the police. As long as the police catch the criminal, the Duke won't get hurt." But as soon as Lei fell asleep, the Duke got up and left. Only his son was left to watch over her. The adoptive mother glared at the father, who didn't keep his promise. She had strong objections. The Duke put on his coat with the butler's assistance. He chuckled softly. Jed seemed to like that child very much. Taking advantage of the night, the Duke picked up his cane. He set out on the path to find the killer. When Lei woke up in the morning and realized it was already too late, only her brother was left sleeping on the sofa in the room. He shook his brother for help. "Oh no, I should have stayed awake. I knew Dad's words couldn't be trusted." He anxiously asked his brother, "Can you ride a horse? Can you help me with something? I'll repay you. I'll do anything you ask." Jed hesitated for a moment, then agreed to his sister's request. But he didn't expect his sister to be in such a hurry. With her tiny body, she pulled him, urging him to quickly set off. However, before he could leave, he was stopped by a horse. The horse was so tall. He watched his handsome brother mount the horse in one smooth motion. His cheeks flushed, his eyes filled with admiration. And his brother pulled him up onto the horse with just one hand. His brother was truly so cool. Why does horseback riding always look so cool in TV dramas? But real horseback riding is so painful. Sitting on the horse's back, he felt like his bottom was being split in two. He also felt dizzy from the horse, and his vision became blurry. He couldn't hear anything his brother was saying. Despite feeling terrible, he endured it. He had to save his dad. The horse ran faster and faster. He finally arrived at the serial killer's house. The hot sweat from running and the cold sweat from fear mixed on his face. But he had no time to wipe it away. He had to go faster, find Dad. His small body pressed on without hesitation. Even if there were unknown dangers ahead, he never wavered. His brother grabbed his hand, curiously asking how he knew the killer was here. He had many more questions he wanted to ask, but seeing his sisters look hoping he wouldn't ask, he could only sigh and hold back his questions. It was the first time he listened to someone like this. Arriving at the killer's doorstep, Lei carefully listened for any sound. There was complete silence. Could the Duke have already been harmed? He remembered the novel's plot. There was an ambush in the room. That killer might have accomplices. No matter how capable the Duke was, he couldn't withstand hidden weapons and sneak attacks. He carefully instructed Jed, if we open the door later, and there's someone by the door, you rush in and hit them. Although his tone was calm, his trembling hands still betrayed his fear of the killer. But he told himself to pull it together. Don't let the Duke get hurt. He overcame his fear and opened the door swiftly and cleanly. That psychopathic killer had already been subdued by the Duke. His neck was tightly held, unable to move. This scene was too bloody for children. When the Duke discovered the two children behind him, he hurriedly ordered his son to take Yangyu away. The brother even covered his eyes, but he was still struggling. No, there must be an accomplice here who can shoot arrows. The next second, he saw the dying murderer move his finger. This further confirmed his thoughts. It must be a trap. He broke free from his brother's hand and shouted, "Duke, this must be a trap." Then he ran towards him, pitter-patter. There wasn't time to pull him away. Lei jumped with all his might. He blocked the bamboo arrow for the Duke, falling softly into the Duke's arms. His brother anxiously ran towards him. Dad gently held him. He gasped for air, unable to stop crying out in pain. The worried looks of the Duke and his brother reminded him of his past life. It was also from this perspective, seeing the worried faces of his father and brother. Except that time, his surgery had failed, and he didn't have time to say goodbye to his family. This time, he seized the opportunity. He called out two words he had never said in this world. "Dad, I'm sorry." The Duke's eyes widened. He kind of hated himself. How could he have had this child in the past? Was it to approach him with a purpose? A daughter with no blood relation. Yet she would take a sword for him. He had always been confident in his abilities. Killing gods if they blocked his way, killing Buddhas if they stood in his path. But at the moment his adopted daughter fell, he felt he was nothing. Why couldn't he have discovered that dangerous arrow earlier? Why couldn't he have killed the murderer immediately? Why did he have to be like a cat playing with a mouse, enjoying the thrill of watching the other's death struggle? Father and son desperately held Lei's body. At this moment, the butler appeared. He came to handle the scene as instructed by the Duke. But he was late because the young lady and young master had suddenly disappeared from the mansion. As a result, when he opened his eyes, he saw the two people he was looking for right here. He was shocked. What on earth had happened here? Holding the small body of his adopted daughter, this heart-wrenching pain, the Duke had only experienced once when his mother passed away. Since childhood, the Duke was despised by the old Duke because he was the source of the family curse. But at the same time, the old Duke was deeply jealous of his son's abilities, which far surpassed his own. This twisted psychology made him brutally harm his young son. It was the Duke's mother who always stood in front of him to protect him. "Mom will always love you. I'm sorry, it's because Mom is too weak." So when his mother was murdered and the killer left behind a golden thread flower, he vowed to find the murderer. The second time Lei appeared before him, she was holding a golden thread flower. The Duke had suspicions. Lei was either an accomplice of his mother's killer or the killer's next target. It was for impure motives that he adopted Lei. Despite this, he still doted on this poor little one. But that was limited to the affection one has for a pet. However, today when Lei not only witnessed him killing someone, but didn't hate him and took a sword for him, and painfully called out Dad, he included Lei within the scope of family. The Duke coldly instructed the butler, "Shiwen, catch that worm on the ground." The butler's usually smiling face showed a sinister expression. "As you command, Duke." Continuing to remain calm, he then instructed his son, Jed, "I need to stop her bleeding. She might accidentally bite her tongue due to the pain, so just in case, put something in her mouth." Jed immediately tore off his sleeve. The Duke used black magic. Black butterflies appeared in his hand, then surrounded Lei's body. Though unconscious, she still shuddered physiologically. Then she calmed down, looking much better than before. The Duke sighed in relief. At least the bleeding had stopped. Shiwen, take her to a safe place. The butler tightened the ropes on the killer. Then let's send the young lady to the hotel run by the Duke's family. It's not far from here. With his adopted daughter's life uncertain, the Duke's expression was calm. But the next second, he said to the doctor, "If this child dies, I will make sure all doctors accompany her in death." The doctor, over 50 years old, panicked and bowed in apology. "We will do our utmost, sir." Sitting by his adopted daughter's bedside, the Duke played with her hair, thinking, "Since you called me dad yourself, then we are father and daughter now." Then he held Lei's hand. "Even if you have someone else's mark on you, I don't care. I will take you away. I will make you my child." Holding Lei's hand tightly, the Duke said to her very seriously, "After you wake up, I will change my educational approach. I will raise you to be a selfish person. Even if I am shot by an arrow or stabbed by a knife in front of you, you should remain expressionless." He gently placed a kiss on his daughter's fingertips. The Duke prayed devoutly, "Please wake up soon." Soon, famous doctors from all over the country were invited. It wasn't a medical forum, but at the bedside of the Duke's adopted daughter, they quietly discussed how to wake her up. The maid thoughtfully drew the bed curtains to prevent the light from being too harsh for the young lady. They treated her as if she were awake, not as a comatose vegetative patient. The butler, calm and composed for over 20 years, became restless because the young lady wouldn't wake up. He even disregarded professional ethics, and for the first time asked his master how the young lady was doing. The Duke, with his hands in his pockets, replied, "The doctor said her life is not in danger." "What about Jed?" The butler first brought wine to the Duke, then answered. "The young master insisted on waiting until the surgery was over, but he seems to be struggling now. He's resting in his room. It's the first time I've seen the young master so unsettled." The Duke swirled the red wine to calm his nerves. "I can understand him. Has anyone from the temple arrived? The high-ranking priest should know magic to alleviate pain, right?" The butler sighed helplessly. "I've already contacted them, but the palace is holding a temple celebration today. Most of the high-ranking priests have gone to the palace, so they said they would send someone after the celebration ends." The Duke's face darkened. He took a sip of wine to calm himself. "Listen carefully. You must convey my next words to the king verbatim. If he doesn't immediately send all the priests here, I will personally go to the palace. And I will make the first royal family member I encounter personally experience the pain my daughter is enduring right now." With his sister unconscious, her brother sat dejectedly on a stool by the bed. He thought about preserving his sister as a specimen, just like he did with Bobo. Bobo was a winged kitten with transparent blue eyes. It was a gift from his father. It wasn't an ordinary cat, but a chimera. A chimera is a magical creature that shares its life with its master. Whether it's the master or the chimera, if one is injured or dies, the other will be affected. Bobo curiously sniffed his brother's nose, not rejecting this human. That day, his father told his son, "You are his master. You must take care of him as you would yourself." Later, when he grew up, he learned that chimeras don't exist in the world. It was all his father's. Lie. His sister now looked exactly like the cat did before it died. The brother touched his sister's lifeless face. He remembered how happy she looked when he first gave her a balloon. He couldn't help but pray silently. He really wanted to see her laughing and talking again. The brother was a bit jealous of his father. Why would his sister rather get hurt herself to save their father? "It's strange. Why does my heart ache?" The brother clutched the bedsheet and collapsed beside his sister. When Lei woke up, she heard not only the doctors crying, "Please, young lady, wake up soon. I still want to see my granddaughter. If you don't wake up, the Duke will have us buried with you." She looked at the unfamiliar ceiling. "Where is this? Why can't I make a sound? Did I die again? Is this the afterlife?" Lei cried silently, clutching the bedsheet in distress. She then turned her head to find her sleeping brother beside her. Lei sat up excitedly, thinking, "So I'm still alive in this world." But she looked at her brother in confusion. "But why is he sleeping here?" The brother was awakened by the rustling of the blanket. He propped up his head and said gently to Lei, "Hello, princess. You're finally awake. I've been waiting for a long time." Lei was amused, but unfortunately, she still couldn't speak. So she waved her arms up and down, indicating, Look, I survived. How lucky. I didn't die, despite that poisoned arrow that almost killed the Duke. The brother immediately noticed that his sister couldn't speak. He quickly poured a glass of water and placed it in Lei's hand. Don't rush, drink slowly. With her parched throat soothed, the little one sighed contentedly. She had been unconscious for 7 days. The doctors were extremely anxious. Young lady, if you don't wake up soon, the Duke will have us buried with you. The weak, pitiful, and helpless doctors huddled together for warmth. Just then, the Duke's son suddenly pulled open the curtains. The little one peeked out from behind her brother. Thank heavens, the young lady is awake. They shed tears of joy. We're saved. But young master, when did you sneak in here? Jed replied expressionlessly. That's none of your business. Lei sighed silently. Brother, you didn't sneak in here without anyone knowing, did you? The brother began to explain to his sister. At first, these doctors diagnosed it as just an ordinary sword wound. And because the Duke stopped the bleeding in time, the wound wasn't serious. But later they discovered there was anesthetic on the sword. That kind of drug is hard to detect, so the doctors didn't notice it at first. The brother had been guarding her day and night, fearing that even a small amount of anesthetic could worsen his sister's condition. Lei's face turned pale. It was truly fortunate that she survived. But her brother wasn't happy. You were shot by an arrow. Is that something to be grateful for? How is my brother still worried about me? The optimistic Lei quickly tried to cheer up her obsessive brother. I mean, the anesthetic could have kept me asleep forever. But thanks to my good luck, I was able to wake up. Seeing her brother's expression improve, Lei breathed a sigh of relief. She then pointed at the frantic doctors. But why are they saying their own spells? Jed explained expressionlessly. You've been unconscious for a week straight. Father was furious because of this. He's been pacing up and down the hallway, muttering, I hate it most when people sacrifice themselves for me. If anything happens to her, I'll go mad and take it out on someone. But Lei didn't think the Duke was angry. She believed he must have been worried about her. Her brother pulled out a box from under the bed. Anyway, Father and I agreed that if you didn't wake up today, we'd draw lots to see which of those useless doctors would be punished. Lei thought, punishment? It must be some kind of ordinary punishment game, right? But she was too naive. When he pulled out a picture with a death skull on it, she was too scared to speak. Her brother announced emotionlessly, Congratulations, you've won. The Duke's family was all-powerful. Even the Emperor had to flatter him with massages. When his daughter was shot by an arrow, the Emperor didn't hesitate. He immediately summoned the 7 best doctors in the country. It wasn't kidnapping, you know. After the young lady woke up, the doctors composed themselves after crying. Excuse us. May we examine the young lady? With Duke Xiao's permission, a full examination began. After it was over, the chief doctor sighed in relief. You're fine now. The wound on your shoulder isn't serious. We'll check again in the afternoon. Her brother was still worried. He stared at the doctor. You won't misdiagnose this time, right? The doctor, over 50 years old, sweated. Yes, there won't be any mistakes. The famous doctors all abandoned their dignity, bowing and scraping like dogs. The young lady is truly the luckiest person in the world. If anything had gone wrong, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The doctors looked at the young Duke expectantly. He nodded. You're lucky. We had already prepared the tools for drawing lots. We'll let you off this time. The doctors all sighed in relief. That's great. Once the doctors left, Lei grabbed her brother's collar and asked, Why did the doctor say I was lucky? What exactly happened while I was unconscious? Jed told Lei to sit down. Don't rush. I was about to tell you. Do you remember that fortune-telling shop? There were all kinds of traps there. The arrow you were hit with was one of them. If the fortune-teller had turned the ring on his hand to the right, the mechanism would have shot a poisoned arrow. If turned left, it would shoot an anesthetic arrow. The criminal was caught by the neck by Father. In his panic, he activated the mechanism. If he had turned the ring to the right at that moment, it would have shot a poisoned arrow. You would have died for sure. The anesthetic arrow was specifically designed for women. He wouldn't kill you immediately to vent his anger. Instead, he would torture you slowly. Lei clenched her fingers, still feeling the lingering fear. It's too scary. Her brother quickly stroked her head to comfort her. But it's all over now. Father has already punished them severely. When his daughter was injured, inviting famous doctors for surgery wasn't enough. He summoned all the priests and forbade them from going to work. They had to stay by my daughter's bedside, continuously casting pain-relieving spells for her. Lei felt guilty. Weren't people who could use magic supposed to be noble? And she was just a little adopted daughter. Her brother patted her head. comforting her not to worry. Anne is the Holy Mother, after all. If you feel bad about it, you can donate more money to the temple later. Solving problems with money, that's the rich people's way of thinking. She didn't understand. She was confused. Stroking his sister's round little head, her brother asked softly, "Why did you shield Father at that time? If Father had been hit by that anesthetic, he definitely wouldn't have been in danger. Why did you take it for him?" But in Lei's view, Father was family. How could she watch a family member get hurt, even if it was just an anesthetic arrow? If it hit the heart, it could still cause serious problems. Anyway, everyone survived. Isn't that good? Her brother's eyes widened. He had underestimated her all along. "You're really amazing. Though small in size, you're braver than anyone I know." She felt a bit embarrassed by the praise, but she waved it off. "You're too kind. I just didn't want the Duke to get hurt. I also didn't want to see you and she went sad." Her brother squinted. He knew his sister wasn't telling the whole truth, but he was still happy. But when her brother mentioned Lei barging into the fortune-telling shop, she broke out in a cold sweat. She couldn't possibly say it was because she had already read about it in a novel, right? To change the subject, she started making a fuss. "Jed, I'm hungry and tired now. I'm fading away, brother." Her brother, concerned, called for servants to prepare a meal. Lei sighed in relief, though she was actually hungry. After eating her fill, she looked satisfied, her cheeks noticeably rounder. She casually asked, "Where is the Duke now?" Her brother was too perceptive. "Father went home first. I'll send someone to call him over." Lei felt she wasn't worthy enough to summon the Duke. She threw herself at her brother, shouting, "No need, it's fine. There's nothing important. Let's not bother him." Lei's face turned pale. She was sweating profusely and her body was shaking uncontrollably. She had witnessed the Duke killing someone. Would she be silenced too? But her brother didn't understand. What did she mean by "it's fine"? Frightened, Lei hurriedly explained, "I'd be happy if the Duke could come, but he's very busy. It's okay if he can't make it." Jed noticed his sister's cautious demeanor. He quickly lowered his head to look at her. "You don't think Father hasn't visited you, do you?" He got only a single nod from his sister. Annoyed, her brother pinched her chubby cheeks. "Silly, Father comes to see you every day. He's just not here right now." Covering her injured little face, she thought, "The Duke comes every day? Since he comes to visit me, it means he's not too angry. I guess my life is safe then." If the Duke knew his daughter's true thoughts, would he be furious? About his daughter, thinking he might kill her to silence her. When he first saw the little beggar, he pushed her away mercilessly. But now, because of an unverified guess, his adopted daughter might be in danger. He was unusually flustered, his face covered in cold sweat. He urged the coachman to hurry, to go faster, then rushed into the hospital. With a bang, he pushed open the door. The loud noise startled Lei right off the bed. Lei peeked out from behind the bed, seeing the Duke and butler appear, panting. Neither had spoken yet, both faces covered in sweat. What had they been doing? The Duke's expression was so serious. Lei thought he must be angry. What should she do? How to explain why she had been at the murder scene? Lei squeezed her eyes shut, not knowing how to face the Duke. But to her surprise, she found herself enveloped in a warm embrace. She was shocked to hear the Duke say, "Child, Dad's here. I'm sorry, something happened outside, so I'm late. I'm glad you're okay. I was really worried." Lei was touched. Her green eyes stared at the Duke. So, this is what it feels like to be cared for. When she was living on the streets, no matter how uncomfortable or hungry she was, she had to endure it. Although she had many friends, when she was sick, she could only take care of herself. But quickly, Lei shook her head vigorously. No, if she got used to being cared for, what would she do if she expected it in the future? She secretly looked at him, leveling her gaze. "Don't you have anything to ask me? I snuck out in the middle of the night without telling you." In the tense wait for an answer, Lei saw the Duke take out a flower. "Isn't this the same type of flower the Duke brought on my first visit? I just thought it was beautiful. I know nothing else about it." The Duke sighed. Lei really didn't know anything about the killer's clues. He reached out and stroked Lei's forehead. "I'm very grateful you saved me, but don't do this again in the future. I'm your guardian. You're my daughter. A father has the responsibility to protect his children. So never sacrifice yourself for me. Not just for me, for anyone." Lei felt comfortable being petted, but she wanted to argue. In the end, she could only obediently agree. The butler smiled contentedly, but soon Lei understood. The Duke must have said this because he was worried about her. She showed a silly smile. The Duke, however, felt something was off. He shook Lei vigorously. "What's wrong with you? You look so silly. The doctor clearly said you'd be out of danger once you woke up. Could they be lying to me? For the doctor's safety." Lei quickly explained, "No, I just suddenly relaxed. My reactions are a bit slow. Strangely, the Duke instead said to Lei, "You must have questions for me, right? Who did I kill? How did I kill them? Aren't you curious about these things?" Lei wasn't scared at all. She thought seriously, probably because he was a bad person. After all, you wouldn't harm an innocent person. His daughter saw him kill someone, but didn't run away screaming. Instead, she treated it as casually as eating or drinking. He was too shocked to speak. Her brother thought his sister was very brave. Such a small person, yet braver than adults. She would take an arrow for her father. Now the Duke felt this daughter was too smart. Just from the scattered documents in the room, she deduced the first crime scene. Even more amazing, the butler said the young lady couldn't read. Oh no, was the fact that she was a transmigrator about to be exposed? She hurriedly explained, "Although I can't read, I used to live nearby, so I've memorized almost all the signs around." The fortune-telling shop was only 2 streets away from where I lived. There lived a tall, creepy-looking fortune teller. There were even rumors that he ate children to maintain his prophetic abilities. I also looked at those 3 papers and saw familiar characters. That's when I thought of the place all those women had visited. It must be that fortune-telling shop. So I woke up my brother and insisted he take me there. What if the fortune teller had captured you too? The Duke still couldn't believe it. Could the little beggar I picked up actually be a genius? Anyway, Lei managed to get away with it, facing the Duke's advice. "Next time, you can't act on your own." She nodded vigorously. The Duke smiled, his eyes narrowing. "It seems that in the future, when investigating cases, I should occasionally ask for your thoughts." The butler also smiled, praising the young lady. "You're very clever, and your intuition is accurate." However, looking at the flower bud the Duke was holding, she curiously asked what kind of flower it was. "Every time you see this flower, your expression becomes very strange." The knowledgeable butler looked at him with a bit of concern, silently lowering her head. Should I not have asked? But the Duke revealed the secret he had buried for many years. "This is a message left by a bad person. That guy was absolutely unforgivable." Lei curiously asked, "How bad was that person?" The Duke shook his head helplessly. "Actually, I don't know, because I have no idea who he is." Then the Duke briefly explained the previous murder cases, and the clues to those cases were the scattered red flowers. About the true identity of the criminal, even the Duke knew nothing. Lei shuddered. She had once received such flowers too. She speculated, so the reason why the Duke adopted me wasn't because I was lucky, but because I brought these flowers? But she really knew nothing about the origin of these flowers. Had she also been suspected by the Duke of being the killer? She suppressed the grievance and confusion in her heart, only thinking about saying how much she liked it here. It seemed she would have to leave in the future. Lei looked up, firmly memorizing the Duke's face in her mind. The Duke understood her look. Stroking her head, he comforted, "You really are clever. At first I did suspect you. I also expected you to know some inside information, because whenever I was in trouble, you would help me." Lei asked softly, "Now, do you still suspect me?" The Duke shook his head. "No, because you saved my life. Even if there are doubts, so what? The father-daughter relationships in this world are all different, aren't they?" The Duke had been cautious all his life, walking in the gray area. Using unconventional means, he dealt with those unforgivable murderers. This secret was originally known only to his son and the butler. Now he completely let down his guard against Yangmi, telling Yangmi everything in detail. He smiled at Yangmi. "Now that you know my secret, you can't escape anymore. Become my daughter." But Lei misunderstood. She stood up and swore, "Duke, I will keep your secret. Even if I die, I won't tell anyone." Seeing Lei so serious, the Duke chuckled softly. "By the way, I have a very important question to ask you." Lei looked serious and nervous, as if she had also participated in the business of fighting bad guys. "Am I going to become impotent too?" The Duke looked down at his adopted daughter. "Why do you still call me Duke? Shouldn't this form of address be changed? Tell me yourself. What am I to you?" Lei's palms were sweaty. She tentatively asked, "Father?" The Duke looked at Lei expectantly. "No, not that one." Lei was so anxious that her forehead was sweating. Father Duke still shook his head with a smile. His gentle tone carried a hint of reproach. "What's going on? You didn't call me that before." Lei felt a bit embarrassed. She lowered her head, not daring to look. After saying the word Dad, she looked expectantly at the Duke's reaction. The Duke was very satisfied this time. His smile widened. "That's right. From now on, you'll call me Dad." Lei was so embarrassed she was steaming. She covered her face, not daring to look at all. She abruptly changed the subject. Where did Jed go? The butler standing nearby recalled, Young master stayed by your side all night last night. He didn't sleep at all. I asked him to rest in the room next door. The Duke turned his head to look at his adopted daughter. He couldn't help but chuckle again. He teased, It seems everyone in the Duke's mansion is revolving around you. Shuin, please call Jed here. Then he picked up his tiny adopted daughter in his arms. Come on, let's go home. Sitting on her dad's steady arms, Lei smiled sweetly. She nodded vigorously. Let's go home. The carriage waiting outside the hospital to take them home was decorated with Lei's favorite balloons. She hugged a golden one, her face flushed with excitement. Jet, are all these balloons for me? After getting her brother's affirmative answer, Lei smiled especially happily. The old father sitting beside them was displeased. She wasn't this happy when she called him dad just now. The brother gave his sister her favorite balloons. The gift wasn't expensive, but it made his sister very happy. The old father sitting beside them was unhappy. He also wanted to see his daughter smile. If you like, we can go to the toy store now. But she was a bit apprehensive, thinking, is it because he's sick that the Duke is compromising? Adults probably don't like buying toys for children. The Duke propped up his face, his handsome eyes slightly smiling. Last time you stood in front of the toy store, looking at the window with such longing. That look was very cute. Which time was last time? As the person involved, Lei thought for a long time. She didn't expect the Duke to remember. The last time he mentioned was when she ran out to find balloons. When Lei was wandering the streets before, she especially envied those children who went to toy stores with their parents. After being adopted, she also thought that maybe one day when the Duke was in a good mood and not busy with work, she might also be able to. While Lei was lost in her fantasy, the Duke mistook her silence for rejection. It's okay. We can go another time. I didn't know what you like, so I just bought the entire store. Lei was so shocked, she let go of the balloon in her hand. She looked at the Duke in disbelief. Why did you do that? Shiwen, is what he's saying true? The butler explained awkwardly. Miss, I tried to stop him, but the master wouldn't listen. It was the first time the Duke had been so impulsive. He turned his head away, embarrassed, and tried to stop the butler from saying more. Lei, puffing her cheeks, demanded the butler. No, you keep talking. The butler sighed and cleared his throat. The day before yesterday, the master said he wanted to give you a gift when you woke up. So he went to the toy store, but he didn't know what to choose. After agonizing for a long time, the butler didn't finish. Lei shouted. So he just bought the entire toy store. The Duke now looked like a child who had done something wrong. He didn't dare look at Lei, and his forehead was sweating. He stubbornly said, No, I only paid a deposit. The butler quickly contradicted. Yes, but the deposit you paid is enough to buy the entire store. The Duke was still stubborn. Didn't I say? I don't know what little girls like. I've never given toys to anyone before. Lei caught a detail in the Duke's words. Wait a minute. You've never bought a gift for Jed? The Duke felt a bit guilty. At Maria Nai's request, I once bought Jed a gift. Was it a teddy bear or a soldier doll? Jed's voice rang out, emotionless. It was a teddy bear wearing a soldier's uniform. Young Jed was just like a miniature version of the Duke. The Duke remembered that after giving the gift, Jed wasn't very happy. He said very coldly, Don't treat me like an ordinary child. This kind of small matter isn't worth your concern. Let's just interact like we usually do, father and son. The son was as mature as an adult even when he was little. He never called him dad, only father. He also refused to be too close to his father and agreed that even on birthdays, no sentimental gifts should be given. Besides, these gifts were all chosen by the butler anyway. The Duke looked embarrassed. The butler was quite surprised. Young master, you actually noticed. Jed didn't care, because the gifts I received every year were very meaningful, like accessories, books, and rare specimens. And father simply doesn't know how to choose gifts. The son was cute when he was little, but he was cold and unapproachable. Fortunately, the Duke now had another daughter, but he believed he loved his son very much. Didn't I allow you into my specimen room and buy you the poisonous snake you wanted? Jed shrugged. But that snake is already dead. The Duke mumbled, trying to salvage his image in Lei's eyes. We already have a bear specimen I brought back from hunting. What's the use of that teddy bear? Lei thought to herself. No wonder her brother couldn't express his emotions. The reason lay with the Duke. The Duke probably never received gifts from his parents either. After all, he didn't know how to be cute. So Lei tugged at the Duke's clothes. I heard red pandas can ward off ghosts that cause nightmares. The Duke looked unconcerned. That's just superstition. Lei puffed up her cheeks, put her hands on her hips, and lifted her chin proudly. Since you don't have a red panda, if you're scared at night, you can come to my room. You can hold my hand while sleeping. After all, you don't have a teddy bear, right? Everyone in the carriage fell silent. Lei felt a bit confused. What's wrong with everyone? What's wrong? We're just overwhelmed by your cuteness. The Duke rubbed Lei's head vigorously. He said through gritted teeth, "What should I do? I really want to bite you hard." Lei was startled. What does that mean? Her brother reminded from the side, "Father, although I understand your feelings, you should be more subtle." The butler, for the first time, was full of enthusiasm, volunteering to do things for Lei. "Miss, you can't go out until you're fully recovered. So, is there anything you want now? If there is, I can go to the toy store to get it for you." But Lei still scolded the Duke for wasting money. She looked up and asked the Duke, "Can't you return the toy store you bought?" "I don't need a toy store. I'd be very happy if you, Duke, could just pick out a red panda for me." Hearing the last sentence, the Duke's previously indifferent face turned into wide-eyed surprise. He wanted to hear it again. "Say that again for me. Start from the teddy bear part." Hearing what he wanted to hear, the Duke was very happy. He planted a kiss on Lei's forehead. "What a pity. You called me Duke again, but I'll still buy you the best stuffed animal." Covering the spot where she was kissed, Lei giggled. Then she brought up another point. "Oh right, you should still return that store." But the three people in the carriage pretended not to hear. He was loved by his family. To repay this love, he acted cute in front of his family members. He let them arrange everything for him, allowing them to enjoy the pleasure of taking care of a child. But when he was alone, he wasn't so much like a child. Without the maid's assistance, he got out of bed by himself. However, one slow step made him pant and kneel on the ground, breathing heavily. "No good, my body feels so heavy." He realized he should have listened to the butler. When sick, one should rest in bed. Moonlight poured into the room. He was attracted by the moon outside the window. Today was the day of the mind's moon, when the fullest and largest moon could be seen. The tranquility of the moon reminded him of many things. His adoption. At first, it was just because he could help the Duke find clues about the Red Flower Killer. Although he had read this novel and knew the Duke would solve the case cleverly in the end, now he had forgotten the description of the killer's appearance. And there was also the fortune teller they had caught earlier. Would use a rare, odorless, and tasteless poison to stun and kill women. But the fortune teller from a poor rural background, how could he have such an expensive poison? This fortune teller had no connection to the Red Flower Killer either. He recalled that not long ago, the Duke had asked him to call him Dad. Of course, he had thought before how nice it would be to have a real dad. After all, being alone was really lonely. In fact, he didn't dare to hope that he would one day have a family of his own, because when good things happened, he worried more about paying the price. He couldn't help but feel anxious. If in the future, he still couldn't get used to calling the Duke Dad, what should he do? What if he got tired of him? If everyone thought he was useless and told him to get out of the Duke's mansion? He made a sincere wish under the moon. "Moon, I don't dare ask for much. Just let me stay in this family." Under the same moon, the Red Flower Killer that the Duke's family wanted to catch was standing on a balcony, enjoying the moonlight. Unfortunately, his face couldn't be seen clearly. He had also given Lei a red flower before. Originally, he wanted to see what kind of existence Lei would become in the Duke's family. Unexpectedly, everyone in the Duke's mansion treasured him immensely. He began to vaguely look forward to what Lei's reaction would be when they met face to face. The Red Flower Killer touched his lips with his fingers. On the back of his raised right hand was a red flower tattoo. Once, he could only look at toys from outside shop windows, begging the shop owner to be generous to a little beggar. Now, every time he woke up, he received a teddy bear from his dad. He excitedly jumped out of bed, happily lifting the teddy bear high. Then he nuzzled it next to his head. So cute and so soft. So this is what a teddy bear feels like. And this bear is special. Its eyes are different colors. Suddenly, a card fell out from behind the bear's bottom. Lei guessed it must be from the Duke. He smiled sweetly. Putting on his slippers, he pattered over to the butler. She wouldn't look at this quickly. He shoved the teddy bear in front of the butler, who again acted like a fussy old woman, nagging, "Miss, don't run so fast. Be careful not to reopen your wound." Seeing how much the young miss liked the bear, he smiled contentedly. "This is a gift from the master. It indeed took quite some time to make this toy." Lei took out the card from earlier. "Shiwen, can you read it to me?" The butler looked confused as he opened it. After scanning it, his eyes softened. So this is the real gift. Then he crouched down, looking Lei in the eye, and handed the card back to him. "Why don't you let the Duke read it to you himself? He would be very happy too." Lei was a bit curious. What was written inside? The butler had to give a spoiler. "It's the new name the master chose for you." For a moment, Lei felt a bit gloomy. He still preferred the name his mother gave him. Besides, nobles' names were always so long. Could he remember it? Just then, the Duke, who had just woken up, appeared behind the tall and short pair. Leaning against the wall lazily, he asked, "What's wrong?" "Shuan, why don't you read it?" The butler was a bit at a loss. The Duke chuckled. "Go ahead and read it." The butler sighed. The master was always so willful. Opening the envelope, he read very seriously, "Hello, Princess. I am the teddy bear. Please give me a name quickly." The Duke, patting Lei's shoulder, teased the always serious butler. "Shiwen, you should read with emotion." The butler sighed deeply. He continued reading. "From now on, I am the princess's teddy bear friend. The gift I've prepared for the princess is your new name. Beautiful and lovely princess, your new name is Letitia. It means a sky with thousands of rising moons. I will protect you when you have nightmares. My two eyes are jewels to decorate the moonlight for you. You must take good care of them, okay?" Hugged the teddy bear tightly. Lei was touched, so the Duke had kept the Lei in her name. He probably hoped that I wouldn't forget every little moment with my mother. I'm just an ordinary girl born on a Monday. Yet he gave me such a beautiful name. After reading, the butler smiled at Lei. The Duke cheerfully praised him. "Shiwen, you read that well." The butler felt a bit embarrassed. "Please don't tease me. Did you write this card yourself?" The Duke, imitating a child's manner, playfully answered, "It's a secret." Then he crouched down again. "Letitia, do you like this name?" Lei nodded vigorously. "I like it. It sounds so beautiful." The Duke was also satisfied. "I've been thinking about what name would suit you, because our first meeting was like a dream. Seeing you like it so much makes me happy too." The Duke rarely expressed his feelings. He had nothing much to say to his biological son. But when it came to his little adopted daughter, his mouth automatically spoke words full of love. "Since you don't know which day you were born, and you've just escaped death today, let's make today your birthday." "Happy birthday, my daughter." Lei blushed shyly. Then she rushed forward and hugged the Duke tightly. "So, this is what it feels like to be needed." The Duke widened his eyes in disbelief. Every time the little lamb girl hugged him, he would freeze up nervously, not knowing where to put his hands and feet. When he heard Lei say she wanted to show off the teddy bear to her brother, he didn't tease her with his usual eloquence. For once, he just dumbly replied. The butler, seeing the Duke in this state, silently laughed. Lei pitter-pattered towards her brother's bedroom. She pushed open the bedroom door. Jed, who had just woken up, was still a bit groggy. Rubbing his eyes, he watched his sister climb onto his bed. With an excited face, she shouted, "Jed, I have a new name." Holding up the teddy bear and card in her hand, she smiled, so wide her eyes almost disappeared. "Letitia is the name Dad gave me, and he even set today as my birthday." Jed's smile held a hint of loneliness and regret. "Father didn't even tell me in advance. Otherwise, the first person to give you a birthday gift would definitely have been me." The jewel eyes of this little bear are very beautiful. "What are jewels?" Lei couldn't believe it. Her brother took the teddy bear and carefully explained to his sister. "The red one is a ruby. The blue one is a sapphire." Lei was stunned. Then her face turned pale. Hugging the teddy bear, she hurried to find her dad. "Duke, sir, I have something to say." She glared at her dad, who spent money recklessly, her demeanor undiminished. "Giving me a teddy bear is enough. There's no need to inlay such expensive jewels. If this continues, I'm afraid I'll become a girl who squanders money." The Duke remained calm. "It's okay. You can spend as you like. You don't need to strictly follow etiquette. It's best if you can reach a level that others can't accept." Lei was stunned. "But if that happens, others will hate me." The Duke didn't see anything wrong. "Actually, that's not bad. You can grow freely. Be a tyrannical and spoiled young lady in the Duke's mansion. Just always be my daughter." The Duke became more and more pleased. He couldn't help but smile. Little Lei's thought process was unique. "If I don't accept the jewels, can I not be your daughter anymore?" The Duke was stunned, not knowing how to answer his daughter's question. In the end, he could only say, "Keep it for now. I won't give you expensive toys in the future." Jed laughed after hearing this. Father is a very stubborn person, but he listens to his sister. One thing subdues another. The daughter complained about her dad's reckless spending. Why buy a teddy bear inlaid with expensive jewels? But Dad didn't care. "I hope you spend freely. No need to strictly follow etiquette. It's best if you become a tyrannical and and spoiled young lady. Then the Duke waved his hand. A white strawberry cake was brought in. It was Lay's first birthday cake in her life, something she couldn't even dare to dream of when she was wandering the streets before. Then everyone in the Duke's mansion came up. They all offered their blessings together. Lay could hardly believe it. She blinked a few times to make sure it wasn't an illusion. Dad, brother, and the butler, these three people who were very important to her, also affectionately offered their birthday wishes. She finally realized it. Her mouth opened wide in a sweet smile. Had the scene from her dreams really come true? She etched this day firmly in her heart because she had a new name. From this day on, she was Letitia, the Duke's little daughter. But Lay didn't know. She had actually already met the Duke years ago when she was wandering the streets. But neither of them had left an impression on the other at that time. That winter, a few little beggars huddled in front of an expensive antique toy store, admiring the unattainable toys. The Duke was inside the toy store, looking at the toy in his hand with a conflicted expression. Would Jed be happy to receive this gift? The butler was as gentle and considerate as always. What's important is that you personally chose this gift. Besides, young master doesn't really lack anything, so whatever you give will be fine. Then the two of them walked out of the warm store and encountered the little beggars hurriedly fleeing. The Duke curiously asked who those children were. The butler told him, "They're the children living in the alley behind. They probably saw the store owner coming out to chase them away, so they rushed to escape." The Duke was a bit doubtful. "Are you sure it's not because they saw me and got scared?" The butler sighed helplessly. "Although you look frightening, most store owners suspect those children of coming to steal when they see them. Naturally, they grab a stick to chase them away. Actually, the way these children peek around is quite adorable." The Duke inadvertently saw among the group of children that little one with green eyes. Her eyes were filled with a touching longing. The Duke was silent for a moment. His profit-driven nature was defeated by the little girl's cuteness. He took out a gold coin from his pocket, gave it to the butler, and told him to tell the store owner not to turn off the lights in the store tonight. Under the butler's puzzled gaze, the Duke explained that even if Jed received the gift, he would just throw it away. It would be better to let other children enjoy this kindness. So that night, Lay alone crouched in front of the store in the snowy night, quietly admiring the exquisite dolls. She thought the store owner had forgotten to turn off the lights, not knowing that someone had deliberately left the lights on for her, making her feel warm even on a snowy day. Although her brother, dad, and the butler, three grown men, all doted on her, she still liked her aunt the most. Annie knew best what girls liked. She always bought her all kinds of pretty clothes. The closet was overflowing, but Annie still praised her for being pretty and cute. Her eyes sparkled with two hearts. "Oh, Letitia, how can you be so beautiful? Your chubby cheeks. You look completely different from when you first came to this family, skinny as a sick cat." Hugging the little bear her dad gave her, Lay shyly lowered her head. Then she sat in her aunt's lap, enjoying her aunt combing her hair. The gentle technique made her raise her little head like a kitten. Annie asked her little niece, "Is this your first time boating?" Lay nodded. "Yes, I've never been far from home before." Annie was melted by her cuteness. "Then you must be very excited, right? Such an adorable child." Auntie continued to ask her how her body was recovering. Lay replied energetically, "I feel very good now." But Annie was still a bit worried. "If you don't feel well, come back right away, okay?" Enjoying her aunt's care, Lay smiled sweetly and nodded in agreement. Looking at her two braids in the mirror, Lay politely thanked her aunt. Annie was both happy and a bit sad. "You'll soon grow into a beautiful young lady. I love how you are now, but I also want to know what you'll look like when you grow up. Yet I hope you won't grow up too fast. This must be what it feels like to raise a daughter." Lay was very understanding. She knew her aunt was single and couldn't get married, so sometimes she looked melancholic. So Lay smiled sweetly and said loudly, "I want to grow up quickly and become someone like you." Annie was a bit puzzled. "Like me? What kind of person do you mean specifically?" Lay turned her head and said, "Someone as beautiful, kind, and radiant as you." Perhaps because subconsciously we believe children don't lie, compliments from kids make us even happier. Annie hugged her little niece and nuzzled her face. "Oh, you're so sweet. You're like a little angel. But my drinking habits are bad. Don't learn that from me." Just then, her brother knocked on the door. As he walked in, Annie, in a great mood, saw her little nephew and joked, "Everyone should enjoy the pleasure of drinking. Jed, you should learn to drink from me." Jed was already used to his aunt's rebellious nature. He replied nonchalantly, "I can already drink quite well. Next time you're unhappy, come find me for a drink." "Why wait until next time?" Lei invited Aunt Maria and I. Won't you come boating with us? Annie kissed her thoughtful little niece. Not this time. The temple has an event this afternoon. You two have fun. Finally, Annie watched the two little ones leave. Lei's smile was brighter than sunshine. But at that moment, she had no idea what this much-anticipated picnic would turn into. While their father was attending an important meeting, the brother took his sister out for a picnic. While boating, the sister smiled happily, thanking her brother for taking her out. Although Jed's face was expressionless, he was very pleased inside. Great, I can finally have my sister all to myself. Just then, a familiar voice came from behind. Jed, are you guys also going to tear Slave Island? The sister looked back and saw three boys enthusiastically greeting her brother. But her brother looked displeased and grumbled, I thought I could spend time alone with my sister. Why did these three annoying flies have to show up? He didn't respond at all, pretending not to see them. He casually introduced those people to his sister. They're my seniors at school, but we're not close, just acquaintances. Then he waved to the boatman, signaling him to quickly row the boat away. With a whoosh, they got farther and farther away from the boat behind them. The sister suddenly felt strange. She had never heard her brother mention anything about school. He was always at home playing with her. Shouldn't students go to school every day? Her brother nodded. My sister is so smart. You even know that students should go to school. Generally speaking, I should go to school every day. After all, attendance scores are important too. But there was a hint of boasting in her brother's tone. But actually, as long as I get full marks in every subject, it can make up for the deducted attendance scores. The teachers are usually helpless against such truant geniuses. Moreover, Jed's reason for skipping class was so plausible. He claimed he was going to train in the magic tower. Lei's mouth gaped open in disbelief. Her brother was lying. But you've been playing at home recently. Lying is wrong. Her brother smiled. I've been playing with you lately, so you're an accomplice too. Inexplicably dragged into this, the only good citizen in the Duke's household panicked. But her little mind jumped back to the topic of school. She imagined herself wearing a school uniform. Oh, I really want to go to school and make friends. But the tuition for a noble academy must be very expensive. I shouldn't be too greedy. Being able to stay at the Duke's house is already a blessing from heaven. She smiled at her brother again and made a harmless little joke. Jed, you're always teaching me to be clever. What if I turn bad? Her brother suddenly became serious. He stared at his sister's face and earnestly advised, I don't want you to be a justice warrior. I hope you can be as selfish as possible. Think more about yourself. Besides, smart bad people are as rare as kind and honest good people. Seeing the conversation getting deeper, Lei hadn't thought much about what kind of person she wanted to be. Just learning to read was giving her enough of a headache. Her brother didn't care about his own studies, but was extremely concerned about his sister's lessons. The more words you know, the smarter you'll become. I heard you can already write a few words. Being able to read was a very happy thing for the former little beggar. I can already write my own name, although I sometimes write it wrong. What else? Under her brother's expectant gaze, she gestured in the air a few times. Oh, right. I've also learned how to write the Dukes in your names. The teacher told us that close, noble relatives write letters to each other. So, I want to write you letters too. Lei smiled, her eyes curving, and her radiant smile infected Jed. The usually cold young man also chuckled. My goodness, you're so interesting. But Lei puffed up her cheeks in anger, thinking her brother was mocking her. Although I don't know many words, it's enough to write letters. Jed laughed even louder. Little beggars were loyal and righteous. They shared beg food with each other. They took care of each other when sick. But there was a strange street rule. Don't share troubles. Don't share good fortune. If someone died of illness, or was beaten badly while begging, or taken away by an orphanage, or if they were lucky enough to go to a better place, don't go looking for them. Just live as if you were strangers. Adopted by the Duke's household, he was already carefully trying not to cause trouble. But the better his life became now, the more he thought about his still wandering little companions. The conflict on his face was all seen by his brother. Lei abruptly changed the subject. Actually, I'm very lucky. Otherwise, I would suffer again in winter. Just thinking about frozen feet and patched up blankets scares me. So I'm really grateful to the Duke and you. Her brother looked a bit confused. Didn't you say before that the street you lived on was warm? Lei started sweating nervously. Those were lies she had made up earlier to make herself seem less miserable. She couldn't look her brother in the eye. Pretending to admire the scenery, she said, but I have a strong body. As long as it's not the dead of winter, I feel quite warm at other times." To make sure his sister wasn't lying, her brother stared intently at her face. Then he said to her, "Taking care of you is my duty. You don't need to thank me." The pressure from her brother suddenly eased. She sighed in relief. But hearing her brother say it was his duty, she strongly disagreed. "No, it's not. The more something is taken for granted, the more grateful we should be." Seeing his sister so wise, her brother smiled contentedly. "Is that so? Then I should say thank you to you more often from now on. Thank you for coming to our family. Thank you for recovering so quickly. That's why we can go boating together now." How heartwarming. Lay's little face turned rosy. She wanted to do something to let her brother know how she felt at that moment. So she suddenly leaped forward and hugged her brother's neck. Laughing loudly, she said, "I'm the one who should say thank you. It's so great that you're my brother." Jed was also happy to receive such affection from his sister. But given his personality, he couldn't say anything more sentimental. He could only say, "Don't fool around. It's dangerous." Lay smiled shyly, but didn't let go of her arms around her brother. She thought how wonderful it would be if these feelings could be treasured deep in her heart forever, like postcards. Even if she had to go through hard times again in the future, these happy memories would be enough to support her to live on strongly. Narrator. The daughter is so understanding. After watching this episode, you all better cry in the comment section. They encountered 3 senior students. He wasn't enthusiastic at all. His attitude was unusually cold. He even had someone steer the boat very fast, afraid they would see his sister. But the 3 seniors still appeared in front of him. He was very unhappy and greeted them coldly. He used his tall body to block the 3 seniors' line of sight. But his sister wasn't interested in them either, because in the alley where she used to live, she had seen too many nobles with bad reputations. So now when she saw young noblemen, she would be scared. Lay took a peek. Since her brother had introduced himself, she wondered if it would be more polite for her to go out and say hello. But as soon as she moved a small step, her brother blocked her completely. He dismissed the 3 seniors, saying, "It's been nice seeing you all today. Let's enjoy ourselves separately and not disturb each other." But the red-haired senior was unusually persistent. In short, he just couldn't take a hint. Jed sighed and had to push his sister out to introduce her. Standing among the sunflowers, Lay looked as cute as a Barbie doll. She instantly captured the hearts of the 3 seniors. Then they turned around and whispered among themselves, "Wow, she's so cute. I can't believe the Duke's family has such a cute child." Lay blushed and looked down at her teddy bear. Praising her like this would make her float. The senior with green eyes turned around first. Smiling, he greeted, "Hello. My name is Lien." His face seemed so familiar to Lay. Strange, she felt like she had seen him somewhere before. Then the red-haired senior bowed and said, "I'm Bo. Jed is my junior." Lay, being very polite, bowed back. Bo then turned his head and covered his mouth with his hand, trying not to make a sound. Even from the back of his head, you could tell he was very happy. Jed clenched his fists unhappily. Lay, on the other hand, looked completely confused. What was he so happy about? Lastly, it was Senior Bosi. He grabbed Lay's hand, intending to kiss it. He said flirtatiously, "The moment I saw you, I thought I was looking at a flower fairy." Senior Bosi closed his eyes, lost in the moment. His hand was about to kiss hers. But Jed, expressionless, lifted his sister up, causing Bosi to kiss his own hand instead. Jed's expression turned murderous, dark, and terrifying. But he still politely said, "I'm sorry. My sister is shy around strangers." His sister, who had been confused from start to finish, swayed in the air. Bosi was scared and broke out in a cold sweat. Bo quickly tried to smooth things over. He didn't mean to offend. He just thought your sister was too cute. But Jed wasn't ready to let it go. Instead, he said with a cold smile, "However, if someone uses cuteness as an excuse to touch her, I won't let it slide." The seniors thought he was joking. Only Lay, who knew her brother best, realized her brother seemed to be serious. With his sister, Jed was obviously much happier. Watching Lay eat, he felt he could never get tired of it. But he waved his hand in disgust, as if shooing away flies. "You 3 seniors, finish your tea and leave quickly." Bo deliberately whined, trying to gain sympathy. "We finally meet by chance, and you're so cold." Jed mercilessly exposed them. "You clearly skipped class to come here for an adventure." Bo's face changed instantly. How are you so smart? You guessed it right away. The two seniors sitting nearby immediately distanced themselves. We try to talk him out of it. The blue rose's curse is terrifying. They once found two corpses in the blue rose bushes. As they chatted, Lei continued to chew her food with cute cheeks. Strange, why did Lian seem so familiar? He was a noble young master. She shouldn't know him. Her brother's seniors were telling his embarrassing stories in front of his sister. He fell asleep during student council meetings. Jet at the ball. Her brother darkened his face and told them to shut up, afraid of ruining his perfect image in his sister's eyes. But seeing his sister laugh until tears came out, he just smiled and stopped objecting, as long as his sister was happy. But then a senior pushed his luck and suddenly suggested, when you start school next semester, bring your sister along. Alarm bells went off in Jed's head. He refused sternly. No way. Annoying flies will follow. Lei saw this side of her brother. He could laugh and joke with his classmates. She couldn't stop laughing at their jokes. The seniors then set their sights on her. Little sister, when you first enter society, you must come to our family's ball. Bosi interrupted. No, your family's ball has no class. For her first ball, of course, she should come to our house. Jed firmly refused. She's still young. It's too early to talk about entering society. As for which ball she'll eventually attend, Father and I will decide. Hugging her doll tightly, his sister looked a bit lost. If Jed says so, does that mean I can't go anywhere? That's not what I meant, her brother said. Overprotection is also wrong. I just want to give my sister the safest environment. Many nobles appear glamorous on the outside, but are actually dark and corrupt inside. Lei understood her brother's concern. More importantly, she could go out and play. She smiled happily. The seniors nearby were moved to tears. Clutching their pounding hearts, they exclaimed, Heavens, how can there be such a cute and obedient little sister? Hearing the praise, Lei's face turned bright red. Jed, on the other hand, looked impatient. Please don't casually praise someone else's sister, he thought. Don't say sweet words to my sister. Tempting her, this strong possessiveness surprised the two seniors. They had always thought Jed was indifferent to everything. So this is how he treats people he cares about. Has Jed been bewitched by the blue roses? What nonsense, Jed interrupted. Don't talk rubbish. The senior heard the cold reply. Instantly feeling nostalgic, he thought, yes, that's definitely him. While everyone was laughing happily, Lian suddenly stood up. I want to go see the blue roses. My sister used to love these flowers. I want to pick some for her. The expressions on Bo and Bosie's faces suddenly turned unpleasant. They looked like they didn't dare to speak. Even their smiles were very forced. Seeing Lei's worried look, Bosie explained. Lian's sister passed away last year. He wants to pick some flowers to visit her. Before, he didn't react to others' life and death. He wouldn't even sympathize with others' tragic fates. The world seemed more like a game to him. But now that he has a sister, he's getting closer to those boys who also have sisters. He wants to learn how to be a brother. There's a classmate of his named Lian. He had a famously beautiful sister named Alicia. She was engaged at a very young age. But last year, Alicia died of pneumonia. Hearing this cause of death, he furrowed his brows. Because when underage girls commit suicide in noble circles, they usually say it's due to pneumonia. His sister, not understanding the implications, choked up with empathy. She looked sadly towards Lian. He was holding many blue roses. These were Alicia's favorite when she was alive. Seeing the atmosphere becoming increasingly somber, Lian actively changed the subject. Let's talk about something interesting. Miss, is there anything you're curious about regarding life in the capital? Hearing Lei say she hadn't really explored much, Lian closed his eyes, recalling the scene when he first came to the capital from the countryside. The tiles stained red by the sunset. The excitement he felt when stepping onto the train station. The bell ringing from the blue clock tower, and the flocks of white doves in the sky. It's my honor to spend my youth in the capital. After hearing Li An's quiet description, Lei became even more curious about the city. After finishing their tea, the three seniors left on their own. Lei and her brother lay down on the painting-like lawn, accompanied by the little teddy bear her dad had given her. Her brother thoughtfully asked his sister, "How was it? Was it fun?" "Very fun." I'm so happy. I want to come again next time." Seeing the big smile on his sister's face, he felt relieved. He was happy too. It seemed bringing his sister out was the right decision. Seeing his sister yawn sleepily, her brother asked, "Do you want to sleep for a while?" Lei nodded, but at the same time was worried. You have to wake me up later. Don't leave me alone and go away. Because now she was still very afraid that a small mistake would break all the good things. Her brother noticed her anxiety. He used a straw hat to shield his sister from the glaring sun, and replied, "Of course, I'll wake you up." After a while, Lei was awakened by laughter and chatter. She rubbed her eyes and sat up, only to find many girls had appeared not far away. It turned out the Duke had arrived. Lei excitedly stood up. She ran to the Duke's side. The man lifted her high. "Letitia, did you have fun?" She smiled sweetly. "Of course. Why did you come?" The Duke looked at his adopted daughter tenderly. "Of course I came to see you. Weren't you unhappy this morning?" Lei didn't believe this explanation. She looked at the Duke suspiciously. "That's just your excuse, right? You actually came to go boating with those big sisters." Lei's jealous words amused the man. "Too cute. I must pinch those cheeks. I never make excuses. The only person who could make me rush over here is you." How terrifying a daughter-doting father can be when jealous. The three grown men trembled in fear, their faces turning pale, unconsciously kneeling before the Duke. The Duke held his daughter with one arm and turned to ask his son, "Jed, who are these flies? How dare they sit and chat with my daughter without female attendants present?" His smile didn't make anyone feel warm. Instead, it felt extremely cold. The Duke glanced lightly at the picnic store. They even drank in front of him. "Duke, that's a double standard. Have you forgotten that you also drink in front of your daughter?" The three men stood up and solemnly swore, "We swear we have never done anything to make the young lady feel uncomfortable." The Duke didn't respond. Looking down on them, he commanded, "Introduce yourselves." The three were so scared they couldn't speak clearly. They stuttered for a long time. They even had to turn around and rehearse once. Jed sighed helplessly, face-palming at these useless seniors. He had to explain to his father, "We just happened to meet here today." The Duke showed a kind smile. "So, are they pests or not?" Jed displayed an identical smile. At least not to the extent of needing extermination. Lei was exasperated. How could they say such terrifying things with such gentle tones? The three people nearby heard this and shook like sieves in fear. This time the Duke was genuinely kind. "I was just joking. It's because my daughter is so adorable that I act like this." "Don't worry." The three sighed in relief, but still couldn't fully relax, because the Duke was staring at them intently, as if ready to eliminate them at the slightest disrespect. Jed suddenly asked his father, "How come you're here so early? The state council meeting should last quite long. Could it be that you're jealous of our siblings' intimate time together?" The Duke sat next to his daughter, pushing his son aside. He casually complained that His Majesty seemed to have become lazy recently, so he ended the meeting early. His son mumbled quietly, "Is that really His Majesty's intention?" The Duke, of course, pretended not to hear and continued to force a kind smile. "Nice to meet you all. What were you talking about earlier?" Lei naturally sat on the Duke's lap, looking at these people. They were both scared and happy to converse with the Duke. Only one person named Percy looked dejected. He stood up to leave. "I want to get some fresh air and sober up." The other two looked admiringly at the Duke. "Can you tell us about your time in the student council?" The Duke looked down tenderly at his daughter. "Letitia, do you want to know too?" The little lamb nodded. "I'm curious about everything about you." So this father began to tell his daughter about his heroic and glorious past. The father and son had seen too much darkness, so they tried their best to protect the girl. But on this day, the family of three went out. They were happily admiring the picturesque scenery when suddenly the father and son's expressions turned serious. The girl suddenly felt something was wrong. She was about to look in the direction of her dad and brother's gaze. But the next second, her brother pulled her into his arms. But she still saw it. The man who was just laughing and talking with them was now lying quietly among the blue irises. His right hand held a dagger, his left wrist bleeding profusely, already staining a small patch of flowers red. Her brother guessed this person was likely to have committed suicide, because his beloved fiancé had died a year ago. The sister felt something was off. She sneaked a glance at the distant corpse. She found that her dad was actually smiling. She couldn't understand. Then Dad instructed him, "Go over there and count to 3 seconds first. Walk 10 steps, then scream loudly. After calling others over, don't come back here. Let us examine the body." He obediently nodded. Even though her brother was only 14, why couldn't she follow Dad and be a little detective too? He followed the instructions. The two friends close to the deceased looked in disbelief. The person who was fine just now was suddenly gone. It should be suicide, right? The three of them were together the whole time. There was no one else on this island. Also, only this shore could dock boats. One of them was so upset he cried. It's my fault for mentioning his fiancée. Did my words trigger him? But Lei felt there were many suspicious points. A person who wanted to commit suicide wouldn't be so happy right before doing it. He was even joking with us. Dad saw him not speaking and quickly walked over to ask, "Are you scared?" Lei shook her head seriously. It wasn't that. She just wanted to help Dad find the killer. But the novel content she knew had already ended. Now she knew nothing. She lowered her head in disappointment. One of the deceased friends looked up at the Duke's family of 3. "No offense, but the ones who discovered the body were your family members." The Duke smiled coldly. "Although there are many unfavorable rumors about our family outside, you don't need to suspect that we conspired to kill him and then called you over. From the amount of blood loss and the speed of blood coagulation, we can deduce that the victim's time of death was at least 30 minutes ago." The Duke looked at one of the deceased friends again. "When you were signaling the servants, your friend was already dead. However, from the scene, this does appear to be suicide. So everyone can say they're innocent. I'm neither a doctor nor a police officer. When they arrive, they'll make their own judgments." Looking at the corpse and the 2 grieving people, Lei was certain in her heart. She felt like something was missing. Something felt off. She felt this wasn't suicide. She gripped her dad's hand tightly, but the Duke misunderstood. "Are you upset?" He crouched down. He took off his black gloves, using his warm, large palm to touch his daughter's forehead. Dad and brother thought she was timid, scared by seeing the corpse. Little did they know, at 7 years old, she was actually thinking about who the real killer was. Dad and brother didn't intend to hide it from her. Although they said publicly the deceased committed suicide, they were privately discussing that this should be murder. There were many suspicious points. The killer should be hiding on the island. But on this island, only this place could dock boats. This season was very quiet. If anyone else had come by boat, we would have noticed for sure. Brother joked intentionally to lighten the mood. Maybe the culprit is a mermaid. But Lei still had a serious face, concentrating on figuring out who the culprit really was. Could the culprit be among us? He turned his head. Suddenly he remembered. Actually, the culprit had already slipped up earlier. The deceased blonde friend was giving his statement to the police officer. He was skilled in swordsmanship, so he could precisely cut his own blood vessels. But Lei's gaze fell on the other friend who hadn't spoken. He tugged on the Duke's clothes, deliberately saying, "Lian is really pitiful. Can we take Lian with us? I want to comfort her on the way. Her sister died, and now her sister's fiancé is dead too. She must be so heartbroken." The 3 of them looked confused, listening to Lei's nonsense. The Duke didn't delve into the reasons. Instead, he hugged Lei and praised his little adopted daughter. "You're so kind." Brother didn't suspect either, pushing Lian along. "Since my sister has spoken up, we have no choice. Senior Lian, let's go." Lian wanted to refuse, but Lei held onto her arm tightly. "No, your face is very pale. It feels like you might faint any second." The Duke also smiled and pushed Lian onto the carriage. "Get on quickly. Our family's educational principle is to fully accept children's whims and tantrums. Since my daughter has requested it, giving you a ride isn't much trouble." Lian couldn't refuse and could only sit in the carriage with her head down. The Duke smiled meaningfully, as if he knew his daughter had discovered something interesting. This made Lei have to forcefully turn her head to look out the window. Actually, the real murderer was the deceased friend and future brother-in-law, Lian. But this time, Lei wanted the Duke to hear Lian's reason for killing. Because in the novel, although the Duke was the embodiment of justice, he didn't live happily. Lei looked out the window again, confirming they should be almost there. "It's here." She hurriedly tugged on the Duke's clothes, using a made-up reason to ask to get off. The teddy bear's ribbon fell out the window. The Duke looked amused. Did it have a ribbon around its neck before? Lei lied without hesitation. "Yes, this morning." Maria's well-trained carriage obeyed the Duke's order and stopped. He took out a silver coin and gave it to the servant, asking him to find the ribbon. Lian in the carriage lowered her head nervously. "Then I'll get off here too." Lei tested her again. "Here? It's quite desolate around here. Not very safe." But hearing her poor excuse, he became a bit impatient. Grabbing her hand, "Lian, before you go, I want to ask you, have you seen me before?" Her dad and brother, with 180 IQs, couldn't find the murderer immediately. But she, who usually only knew how to act cute, discovered something was off. She questioned the murderer. "What color is the clock tower at the train station?" The murderer confidently answered that it was blue. Lei shook her head vigorously. "You said it was gold before." The murderer awkwardly scratched their head. "Maybe. I had been drinking earlier." it was just a slip of the tongue. Lei became even more certain they were the murderer. She told them, "That's not right, because blue is also the correct answer." The train station clock tower uses special paint. It's gold during the day. At night, it turns blue. Street children often use that clock tower as a meeting point. At the blue clock tower means meeting at the tower at night. Lei still remembered when she was still wandering the streets. Her friends insisted on watching trains during the day, so they dragged her to the station. That's how she discovered this clever color change. Moreover, all trains stop running before 6 p.m. nationwide. No one is allowed in or out of the station at night, so generally no one would be there late at night. Therefore, only children from nearby villages would use the clock tower as a meeting place. Most of them were thieves. That's why Lei thought the murderer looked familiar, because she had seen them at night gatherings at the clock tower before. But Lian was clearly a noble young lady. She couldn't have been living on the streets. Lei suddenly felt dizzy. There couldn't be two Lians, could there? Dad listened to his daughter's analysis with a smile, a proud expression on his face. The murderer stammered, unable to speak. Just then, the carriage door was suddenly flung open. Someone grabbed Lei and held a knife to her throat. "Don't move! Release Lian quickly!" Lei nervously broke into a sweat, but at the same time nodded to herself. "I wasn't wrong. They really are twins." The Duke remained calm, looking down from the carriage. "If you let her go now, I can ensure you die painlessly." But the person remained unmoved. "Release Lian quickly, or else this girl." The Duke's tone remained flat. "What do you want to do to her? Cut her face? Or chop off one of her fingers? You don't think I'll do your bidding just because you're holding my daughter hostage, do you?" The Duke raised his hand. A subtle black magic quickly subdued her. Someone was holding his daughter hostage, demanding his cooperation. He refused. Then with a wave of his hand, black mist condensed into a black snake. It coiled around the person, rendering them completely immobile. This was absolute confidence in his own abilities, not a lack of love for you. Then he walked up to the person with a grim expression. Raising his hand, he said, "I will make you experience the most painful death." Her brother in the carriage also pulled out a sharp knife from his pocket. Grabbing the hostage-taker's family member, he said, "Father, I'll kill him right now." Just as the twins were about to lose their lives, the one who was almost hurt shouted, "Wait, I want to hear their story." Dad and brother were both stunned. Lei also felt a bit nervous. Such an impolite request, they probably wouldn't agree. Unexpectedly, Dad said, "All right, Lei, we'll do as you say. But this guy dared to hold a knife to you. Let's cut off his hands first." Lei's pigtail stood on end in fright. How is that any different from killing him outright? If his hands are cut off, he'll die from blood loss. As the Duke's large hand was about to grab the hostage-taker lying on the ground, Lei anxiously shouted, "I'm fine. He didn't hurt me at all." At his daughter's repeated insistence, he had to let go. "I'm not interested in murderer stories, but since it's my daughter's wish, go ahead and speak." The twins, bound by black snakes, knelt before the three of them. Lei carefully noticed that one of them was completely soaked. Her brother spoke up, asking, "When did you two start switching identities? Who actually killed Bosi?" The two gathered their thoughts, unsure where to begin. Dad had to ask Lei, "How did you know who the murderer was?" She nervously shrugged her shoulders, sweating as she changed the subject. "That's not important. Don't you want to know the whole story?" Meanwhile, she thought, the pressure from this father and son is unbearable. The Duke pretended to be annoyed. "Since you insist, we'll do it your way. I feel like I'm becoming a daughter's slave." Lei breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Duke released one person's leg. Bending down to lift his chin, he threatened, "If you dare bite your tongue, I will torture the other one until he dies." Her brother particularly disliked this old father. "You shouldn't threaten people in front of Lei." Lei's legs twitched nervously. "It's fine, I heard everything anyway." The Duke, looking at the murderer, "Well then, let's start the interrogation as my daughter requested. Tell us why you killed someone. Death is too easy for you." This father and son secretly tortured unforgivable murderers. They firmly believed in the evil of human nature. They only had malicious speculation about killers. But when you gaze into the abyss also gazes into you. Unknowingly, their hearts grew colder and colder, gradually consumed by the darkness of human nature. But this time, the decision of both daughter and sister changed their minds. She insisted repeatedly, "Why don't we hear why these twins killed someone?" The daughter's slave and sister complex agreed. The twins' method of killing was simple. When the brother went to pick roses, he switched identities with his twin, while the younger brother was chatting with the Duke's family. The older brother, who had been lying in wait, killed the victim and disguised the scene as a suicide. He also created an alibi for himself. Lei clearly remembered that Bosi didn't scream when he was killed. He must have been drugged. The older twin shook his head. If I had done that, you would have discovered it long ago. After all, you're very smart. At that time, I used a handkerchief soaked in drugged water to cover his mouth, making him temporarily unconscious. Getting Bosi to take the bait was actually quite simple, because he always sent some blue things to my sister. So I deliberately brought up old matters, provoking Bosi. But I don't regret it, because that bastard Bosi played with my sister Elise's feelings. Both twins gritted their teeth in anger. When they were young, their family was poor, so they could only send the younger brother to be raised by relatives. Later, the relatives who adopted the younger brother married and moved to China, so he ended up on the streets. That's why Lei felt a strange familiarity when she first saw the older brother. It wasn't until the younger brother was caught pickpocketing by his older brother on the street that they reunited. To let the younger brother live a noble life, the twins had been sharing one identity for years. They took turns attending the academy and practiced how to maintain a consistent story. Now Lei's brother realized why he sometimes felt like his classmate had become a different person. Jed asked him, "Then why did you kill Bosi, your future brother-in-law?" The older brother's voice was filled with infinite sadness. "Because he caused the death of my sister. As Elise grew up day by day, she became increasingly beautiful. So, wealthy and powerful young men lined up to propose to her. Many people said that if Elise canceled her engagement to Bosi, they would pay the penalty for her. When Bosi heard about this, he was worried Elise might break off the engagement, so he wanted to quickly consummate the relationship, right?" The Duke guessed the correct answer using just his toes. But Lei said, "But this surely isn't the whole story." The older brother was shocked. This 7-year-old girl was amazing, as if there was a detective living inside her body. They were about to get married, yet this man was worried his partner might break off the engagement. So he used the excuse of being drunk to consummate the relationship. What's worse, besides this man, there were several other scoundrels in that villa at the time. Those bastards kept giving the man alcohol, and after he was completely drunk, to Elise. That's why the twins took such drastic action. To avenge their sister who committed suicide. After hearing the whole story behind the murder, the Duke was still puzzled. "But one of you didn't grow up with her. How could you have such deep feelings?" The older twin kneeling on the ground raised his head. "That may be true, but we 3 siblings once lived together in the villa for a week. That was one of our few happy times. It's those beautiful memories that have supported us until now. I'm the one who committed the crime. Even if you want to do black magic experiments on me, I have no complaints, but I only ask that you spare my younger brother." The Duke sighed. "Who on earth is spreading rumors that I'm doing black magic experiments?" Before facing death, the older twin had one last question. "Miss, how did you know that my brother and I were meeting here?" Her brother and father also stared at her intently, as if expecting her to offer a different perspective. She had no choice but to explain. "When Percy left, weren't we all together? If Percy was murdered, it means there were others on that island besides us. But the police didn't find any traces of other people's activities on the island. This indicates that the culprit had already left before the police arrived. There's a bridge near where we boarded the boat, very close to us. One could easily swim against the current to reach it. Under that bridge, there's a small hole connecting to an underground passage. And this place is the end of that underground passage. Any child who has lived on the streets knows this secret." Her brother thought for a moment and realized how remarkable his sister was. She had deduced so much from just one inconspicuous clue. Her father was even more generous with praise. "You're truly incredibly smart." This made her scratch her head in embarrassment. In fact, the Duke had already sensed that Percy's death was a homicide. He had planned to investigate, but didn't expect his obedient daughter to already be interested. He looked at his son, Jed. "What do you think about this?" Surprisingly, Jed stroked his sister's head, smiling gently. "I can understand the feelings of these 2 brothers." Dad looked at him in disbelief. "You?" The brat Jed nodded. "Yes, because now I'm also an older brother." He walked behind the twins. "Although I don't want to think about it. If anyone dared to touch a hair on my sister's head, I would definitely be furious." The next second, he smiled and put his hands on their shoulders. "To be honest, right now I want to kill one of them to quell my anger." Just imagining his sister being harmed made him laugh angrily. He wanted to practice on one of the kneeling men, how to make someone feel worse alive than dead. But he let it go this time. His sister was present. He asked for his sister's opinion. "Letitia, you decide the fate of these 2. The girl was startled. Then she wondered what would happen if they were released. Her father saw right through her. You want me to let them go? If that's the case, I'd rather not leave any witnesses. After all, I'm a petty father. The Duke deliberately put on a troubled expression. Her brother also played along. In that case, let's execute these two criminals. Lei thought it was too childish for her dad to pull her hair, executing them out of jealousy. She recalled the fantasy she had read. The twin sister was so pitiful, killed by such scum, that scum should also be killed. So she raised her eyebrows and said sincerely, I only hope the Duke can make a decision he won't regret. Because Lei knew what kind of person the Duke was, not as glamorous as he appeared on the surface. He punished bad people. He was a hero with a melancholic air. He never showed mercy to criminals. But Lei still hoped that after hearing this story, the Duke would reconsider his decision. She didn't want the Duke to leave any room for criticism, because the twins were different from the criminals he had killed before. The Duke lowered his head and gave Lei a genuine smile. Actually, I want to thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have known the story behind this. Lei smiled happily. So she had been helpful to others after all. And after hearing Eliza's story, the Duke indeed changed his mind. She put her hand in front of the twins. Then please don't kill them. Let's hand them over to the police instead. But the next second, unexpectedly, the Duke suddenly approached the twins. Do you remember those bastards who hurt your sister? The Duke, newly devoted to his daughter, understood the difficulty of raising a girl. He planned to punish those scoundrels who had abused the twin sister on their behalf. It was also a way to clean up the scum in the noble circle for his daughter's sake, to safeguard his daughter's future. But the twins were still hesitant. Could the Duke really be trusted? The man continued to persuade. Just tell me their names, and I'll let you go. Of course, this is also for my daughter's sake. Lei stood by, feeling perplexed. The Duke's tone didn't sound like he was going to kill someone, more like introducing a blind date. Lei's sister-complex brother suddenly sat down next to the older twin, smiling. He put his arm around the other's shoulder. I've taken a liking to you. To avenge your sister, you meticulously planned a murder scheme. I should learn from you. But if you dare to talk to my sister, you might die by my hand. Then Jed leaned in to whisper, so his sister couldn't hear. Your revenge plan was too lenient on those perpetrators. If it were me, I would definitely torture those people to death. But Lei still heard it. I'm just young. Doesn't mean I can't hear. She was so shocked her mouth hung open. I knew it would be like this. I thought too highly of this father and son. The Duke looked down at his little daughter. Don't worry. Compared to solving a big case, dealing with a bunch of thugs is effortless. Those who do wrong must be punished. When it comes to dealing with scum, I'm an expert. Although Dad and brother didn't tell her, Lei had read the novel. She knew Dad would use black magic to absorb power from humans. Those whose power was absorbed were considered as food. The Duke usually chose 3 types of food. The first type was murderers. The second type was people who had just died. The third type was those who harmed innocent women, because abusing women was more unforgivable than murder. In the Duke's eyes, criminals who hurt women were as hateful as murderers. Of course, Lei also thought those who killed Eliza deserved to die. So this time, she didn't stop the Duke. The Duke, who always punished evil and promoted good, let murderers go for the first time, because he could understand the twins' feelings of avenging their beloved sister. Imagine if someone hurt his daughter. He would definitely make them pay 1,000 times over. The twins cried with tears streaming down their faces, holding hands tightly. We can't believe we survived. It's unbelievable. The Duke snapped his fingers. But since you've killed before, it's easy to commit crimes again. So I've left a mark on you. If you dare to commit crimes again, I'll come to catch you immediately. The twins searched their bodies for the mark. Jed looked at them as if they were idiots. Don't bother looking. Those marks are invisible to the naked eye. With the matter settled, the Duke called for his daughter. Holding the tiny child in his arms, he sat in the carriage, satisfied. Before leaving, he thanked the twins for their hospitality. Seeing the twins' confused looks, the Duke explained, when we found Percy, he had just died, right? So he became my food. Lei thought back. No wonder you told me to wait a while before calling for help. Jed leaned out, grabbing the door to close it. His expression was indifferent. Thinking that Senior Percy was that kind of scum, I'm no longer sad about his death, but he was still someone I knew. It feels a bit weird that my father ate him. The twins were completely confused. What does this mean? Are this father and son crazy? Inside the moving carriage, the Duke was in a good mood, heart with tears, indeed very pleasant. He looked at his daughter, attributing his good mood to her. Indeed, every time I go out with you, I discover many interesting things. Then he lowered his head and stared at his daughter with a probing gaze. I know what kind of person you are now. Lay's braids jumped in fright. Does the Duke know I'm a transmigrator? But the Duke excitedly shouted, "You're a genius. An ordinary little genius at solving cases." Lay couldn't bear being praised like this by a truly intelligent person. It was like showing off in front of an expert. Besides, she had the advantage of being a transmigrator. She quickly waved her hands and explained, No. Actually, I was just guessing. I didn't expect to guess so accurately." The father and son seriously concluded, "My daughter is a genius." Frightened, the girl quickly explained, No, I was just guessing. I didn't expect to guess so accurately." Brother calmly said, "Don't lie. Once is a coincidence, twice is a pattern." Lay dared to show off in front of Guan Yu. Admitting to being a genius in front of two high-quality humans was just too embarrassing. Brother crossed his arms and presented his argument. A child who has never received education, whether it's text or pictures, she can memorize at a glance. Lay waved her hands in fright. "If I were really that good, how could I have been begging on the streets before? After all, I can't even recognize all the characters." Suddenly, her gaze was drawn to the scene outside the window. Two little beggars were shivering on the street, covered with thin blankets. If she hadn't been adopted by the Duke, she would have been one of those freezing children. This winter was particularly cold. Lay's face turned sad. Brother seemed lost in thought. Every time they passed this street, his sister would be how to keep Lay happy all the time. Lay composed herself, sat back in her original position, hugging her teddy bear and mumbling softly, "I'm not a genius. I'm just an ordinary person." The Duke didn't take her words to heart. "Never mind, we'll do a test and find out." Jed met with several doctors when he was young. They can determine if you're a true genius. Enjoying the Duke's caress, Lay's face turned pale. She couldn't help but think negatively. After the test, the Duke will surely know I'm not a genius at all. Will he disown me as his daughter then? As night fell, the carriage finally arrived home. The butler, as always, stood at the door, bowing to welcome them. He carefully noticed Lay's dejected expression, but the Duke looked triumphant. The butler curiously asked, "Did something happen?" The Duke's tail was almost reaching the sky. He had rarely been this proud in his life. He couldn't help but boast to the butler, "Indeed, many things happened today. But the biggest gain is that I discover my daughter is a genius." The butler slowly raised a question mark. The daughter-obsessed father had finally gone mad. He knew his intelligence was far above average. But so what? Until this day, he was very surprised to find out his daughter was also very smart. He couldn't contain his happiness and couldn't help but brag to the butler, "My daughter is a genius." Holding a glass of red wine, the Duke looked elegant and noble. The smugness on his face was actually pride for his daughter. The butler listened very attentively, without blinking, as the Duke talked about the young lady. He almost gave a poster-style applause for the young lady's clever actions. The person in question felt so embarrassed. Calling herself a genius, oh God, she just wanted to bury her head in the ground. She angrily ate large mouthfuls of food. She finally understood a bit. In her previous life, she only scored 80 points, but her mom had to brag about it until the whole neighborhood knew. That kind of embarrassing feeling. After dinner, she lay on the 200-square-meter bed, feeling very depressed. What if the Duke finds out I'm not a genius? What if he kicks me out? Just as she was worrying, her brother knocked and entered. "I came to check on you. How are you?" Lay thought her brother was acting strange. Nothing had happened recently. Her brother looked concerned. "Why do you always look sad when we pass that intersection in the carriage?" Hugging the teddy bear she never let go of, her expression turned sad. "I used to live in that alley. Every time we pass by, I'm reminded of the days of hunger and cold. Just thinking about that biting wind makes me feel cold all over." Her brother bent down to look at her. "Anything else?" He glanced at her. Her brother gradually opened up. "I also think about my friend's brother." Brother stroked her head sympathetically. She pretended to be at ease. "But you don't need to worry about it, because I promised them we'd forget each other." After her brother left, she lay on the bed and sighed silently. Opening her gradually plumping hand, she stared blankly. Today, when she touched the Duke's hand, she saw visions. It was because of these visions that she confirmed there were actually two killers, and they were twins. She was full of questions. What exactly was that? And why did she see those visions? When would they appear again? How could she use this ability? Hugging the panda bear her dad gave her, she fell asleep anxiously. She didn't want her dad to praise her as a genius. It was too embarrassing. Wasn't it like showing off in front of Guan Yu? She thought her dad had forgotten about it. But one day, while she was drawing in front of her dad, he suddenly said, "Letitia, do you want to go out and play?" She suddenly looked up, her face full of excitement and joy, just like a puppy hearing it could go out to play. She almost wagged her non-existent tail. "Where are we going to play, Dad?" The Duke, flipping through the newspaper, observed his daughter's happy face with interest. "Maria has been nagging me, saying you really liked that cafe we went to last time. I happen to have some business in that area." The word cafe completely struck Lay's heart. She felt like many little cakes were waving at her. So, like a puppy voluntarily grabbing its leash, she zoomed out of the room. "I'll go change my clothes right away." This caused the butler to anxiously shout behind her, "Young lady, please slow down. Leave such small matters to the servants." Lay stopped abruptly, feeling a bit embarrassed. "All right, I was too hasty." The daughter's pure excitement also infected the Duke. He sat on the sofa, resting his chin on his hand. She was very happy that everything was ready. Lay was dressed beautifully in an exquisite cloak coat. She carefully asked the Duke, "Can you hold my hand while we walk?" The old father was instantly touched. He picked up Lay and hugged her tightly, almost wanted to kiss her cheeks. "You really know how to be cute, child." But Lay actually just wanted to test if she could see visions again when holding hands this time. Holding her father's bony hand, she saw nothing. The little one sighed silently as she sat in the carriage. This superpower was truly unpredictable. The carriage traveled for some time. Finally, it stopped in front of a research institute. Lay looked at her old father with disdain, sensing something was amiss. "Duke, hadn't you already forgotten about me being a genius?" Indeed, all fathers are liars. In her previous life, she was tricked into eating pork cutlet, but ended up at the dentist. She shook her head vigorously in refusal. "I don't want to go in," she cried loudly. The Duke is a liar, but she was still dragged in by her father. The doctor at the entrance welcomed the father and daughter with a smile. The Duke temporarily handed his daughter to the doctor. "I have to attend to some business, so I'll leave first, but the bodyguards will be waiting outside. If you dare to bully my daughter, you're finished." The doctor immediately assured he wouldn't be disrespectful to Lay. But Lay was very anxious. She grabbed the Duke's clothes. "Don't go, Your Grace." The old father patted her head. "I have things to do. Be good." Dad tricked her into going to a cafe for cake, but instead came to the research institute to do tests. She was so angry, she puffed up like a pufferfish, lowering her head and refusing to speak. The doctor standing nearby burst out laughing. This made Letitia even angrier. "I'm angry right now. How can you laugh?" The doctor quickly apologized. "I'm sorry. It's because you're too cute. Just now you looked like a lost puppy." Lay glared at the doctor fiercely. "I'm not a puppy." Being interrupted while angry, she suddenly felt embarrassed to continue being angry. Looking at the doctor's hair, she asked curiously, "I thought all doctors had gray hair and were older people." But the doctor smiled, his eyes crinkling. "Actually, I've just come of age. I gained a lot of knowledge at a young age, so people call me a genius." The Duke wanted to confirm if you're also a genius. That's why he brought you here. "I can help you with that." Seeing the little one's unhappiness, the doctor quickly explained, "Don't misunderstand. Both the Duke and I are doing this to help you." But Lay, this child, seriously replied to the adult, "I appreciate your kindness, but I don't need this kind of help, because I'm not a genius." The doctor was completely won over by Lay's cuteness. "Don't worry, young lady. Actually, this often happens in noble families. For example, when foolish parents think their child is a genius, they bring the child here for testing." Lay felt like she had been hit, but the Duke isn't foolish. He's actually very smart, the doctor said while flipping through documents in the drawer. Many parents think their children are geniuses, but these expectations often fall short. However, those parents have impure motives. They all want to use their children to achieve certain goals. But the Duke is different from them. Lay couldn't hear anything else. Just the words "expectations fall short" were enough to make her imagine being abandoned by the Duke for not being a genius. Dad insists his daughter is a genius. He even tricked her into coming to the research institute to test her IQ. But she was troubled, knowing she's not a genius, yet being treated like one. What if she's exposed and thrown out of the Duke's mansion? Just then, the doctor, this young genius, bumped into the table, making a loud noise. It startled her out of her melancholy mood. "Are you okay?" The doctor waved his hand, dizzily touching his head. "It's fine if there's no blood. I actually bump my head often." Lay never thought that as a child, she'd have a day where she'd worry about an adult. This guy, though handsome, is quite clumsy. The doctor then took out a picture that intrigued Lei. He asked Lei, "How many times do you need to draw blood to get out of this maze?" Then there were questions about numbers, cause and effect, and context in articles. Lei could answer some questions, while others left her puzzled. But she hadn't properly studied reading and writing in either of her two lives. In her previous life, she died too early before even starting school. Now Lei was staring at the chessboard, pondering. Finally, she carefully told the doctor, "The princess can't get out of the chessboard because the first knight destroyed the path. Is that right? The other end of the continent is also..." The doctor didn't speak this time. He stood up and instructed Lei, "I'm going to tally up the test results now. Please wait a moment." Lei looked indifferent. The test results surely wouldn't show she's a genius anyway. Geniuses are those with photographic memories who can invent things. Geniuses can remember more than 10-digit numbers and do mental calculations. In short, only people like Einstein can be considered geniuses. But thinking about what the doctor said earlier, those parents who discover their children aren't geniuses end up greatly disappointed. Lei deflated like a balloon and slumped onto the table. She guessed, "The Duke is so obsessed with testing my intelligence. Probably because he wants me to help him with things. If I can't help him, will he be disappointed? He won't kick me out of the Duke's mansion, will he? Even if he doesn't kick me out, I might become the family's scapegoat." The more Lei thought about it, the sadder she became. She clasped her little hands and started sobbing. She desperately hoped that the test results would come out later. She wanted to stay at the Duke's mansion a bit longer. She waited for 3 hours at the research institute. Her dad, who promised to pick her up soon, finally appeared at the door, drenched in sweat. The pent-up emotions suddenly burst out. Dad anxiously asked what happened, if the doctor had said something. She shook her head. It wasn't that. "I'm fine," but she was still a child after all. Unable to control her inner gloom, her tears flowed like Lanshow noodles. "I'm sorry, I'm not a genius." Dad was stunned. "You're crying because of this? Weren't you bullied?" He quickly wiped his daughter's tears. Lei honestly told her dad, "I couldn't answer half of the doctor's questions today. My memory is also very average. I can't help you at all. I'm so useless." The Duke was surprised. When did he ever make his daughter think this way? He pulled his daughter into his arms. He gently comforted her. They say daughters make fathers' hearts flutter, and this saying was really true. "I don't expect you to help me. I'm just worried about you. You know, everyone in our family is very. Jed and I are the best examples. We often skip grades or graduate early." Lei lay on her dad's shoulder, her eyes swollen from crying, barely open. She felt wronged. "But I'm different from you. I'm not your biological daughter." The Duke hurriedly explained, "Real geniuses often commit suicide or suffer from depression because their extraordinary minds don't match their bodies, so they often become very unhappy." Lei stopped crying now, listening intently to her dad's explanation. "Although not severe, Jed had myasthenia when he was young. So I was thinking if you were really a genius, we'd need to prepare in advance, just in case. You're exactly how I hoped you'd be. How could I not be happy? What parent wouldn't love a child as clever and cute as you?" Lei, with her dad patting her little head, buried her face in his shoulder. She wanted to cry again, but this time it was tears of joy. Dad gently patted her back. "Even if you're a bit silly, it doesn't matter. Your future task is just to spend the family's money. You can definitely do that, right?" This dad actually hoped his daughter wouldn't be too smart, preferably a bit silly, so that his daughter's only task in life would be to spend the family's fortune. Lei laughed at her dad's joke. "Duke, your way of comforting people is so strange." The man smiled at her. "So, you're not crying anymore?" Lei blushed a little. Crying in front of Dad just now seemed a bit embarrassing. She wiped her tears with her sleeve. The Duke smiled and asked, "Shall we go to the cafe now?" Lei, extremely fond of small cakes, cautiously asked, "You won't trick me this time, will you?" The Duke was charmed by his daughter's cuteness. "Of course not. After all, I've promised you. Whatever you want to eat, just say it. I'll buy it all for you." Lei had already decided what she wanted to eat. She wanted to have chocolate cake. However, the Duke also told his daughter Letitia, "The test results aren't important. When the doctor comes out, we'll chat for a bit and then leave. By the way, he really didn't bully you, did he?" The doctor, who had just entered, heard the last sentence and became very nervous. He greeted the Duke while holding a large pile of documents. "The results are out, but it's a long story." The Duke looked at him a bit reproachfully. "Then make it short. I still need to take my daughter for snacks." The sharp gaze made the doctor very flustered. Although the young lady isn't a rare genius, her performance in certain areas is indeed extraordinary. Her talent can at least be considered gifted. already prepared mentally. The Duke, who thought his daughter was ordinary, suddenly stood up, slamming the table loudly. What does this mean? Explain quickly. The doctor was so scared his soul almost left his body. It's like this. The young lady has a talent for languages. Her expression ability is also excellent. Considering she can't read and hasn't received much education, her reasoning ability, observation, and reaction are still quite good. Not bad, her memory is also better than average. What's surprising is, although the young lady has never learned arithmetic, she's very sensitive to numbers. In other words, the young lady's talent is very rare. The doctor, still fearless, added, "Young lady, it seems you need to study hard to not waste your talent." Lei was so shocked her jaw dropped. The Duke smiled happily. As expected, I knew my daughter was a genius. Lei quickly corrected her dad. The doctor clearly said gifted, but the Duke still looked proud. Actually, there's no difference. You were already smart. Add to that your cute appearance. How could you not be a genius? Someone actually wanted to be alone with his universally super, invincibly cute daughter. Duke clearly wrote the 4 words, "I'm not happy," on his face. Is there anything you can't say here? The Research Institute's doctor, under pressure, showed a friendly smile. Only when the guardian isn't around can the young lady speak freely. So please stay here. The old father reluctantly pouted. His daughter comforted him. I'll go in first. I'll be out soon. He thought anyone who saw Karen's eyes wouldn't dare to hurt her. Lei carefully followed the doctor into the inner room. Countless models and books, along with strange experimental instruments. Lei was a bit excited. What are all these? The doctor, looking dazed and a bit flustered from the Duke's threat, said, "This is my private research room. I've done research in various fields. I can also provide you with gifted education courses." Seeing the young lady's curious face, he couldn't help mentioning, but Duke loves his daughter too much. He probably won't agree to send his daughter to a place so far from home. Lei, not paying attention to what the doctor said, looked around. She felt something was strange. The doctor nodded approvingly. "So you've already noticed. This room is the final test. Now let's relax. Let's solve the last question." Lei nodded seriously. Her chubby face was full of anticipation and eagerness. She heard the doctor say, "You just need to find the hidden question in this room." She observed carefully. Brown bookshelves and desk, chairs for guests, tables of the same size. The structure of this room was identical to the previous one. If you remove the documents and other miscellaneous items, it would be exactly the same. She couldn't help but wonder, is this a spot the difference game? Where were the differences between the 2 rooms? She suddenly noticed something fishy about a painting on the wall. Although both paintings inside and outside the room were landscapes, the one outside depicted a crossroads, while the one inside showed a circular railing and flower beds. Cross and circle. She thought carefully. Then she smiled innocently and asked the doctor, "Is there a book on the shelf with a title that has cross and circle in it? I can't read all the characters yet, so I have to ask you." The doctor exclaimed, "Talented people are indeed different. Although you can't read much, you can still follow the clues through details. This book's title is Cross-Languaged." The doctor smiled and pulled out a book to give to Lei. The girl didn't relax. "Wait," the doctor said, "follow the clues, so this book might not be the final answer." So she cautiously replied, "I feel like this book might not be the final answer." She examined carefully and found a circular mark on the spot where this book was placed. This circle seemed to be intentionally carved. So now there were 2 circles, 1 cross. If the cross symbolized a plus sign, did it mean adding the 2 circles together or putting them side by side? Lei suddenly looked serious. "That's right, it symbolizes the infinity symbol." She asked the doctor, "Do you have a book called Infinity? Or one that contains these 2 characters?" The doctor suddenly became extremely excited. He pulled out a long-hidden book called Infinite Love. Opening the book, there was only a note inside. "You're great," the doctor praised generously. "Actually, cross-language was also an answer, but I didn't expect you to consider so much." There were several more test questions after this, but the Duke must be getting impatient. "So, let's end here." Lei chuckled. These questions were really interesting. The doctor pointed to the "You're great" note. "That paper has my research institute's address." He gently patted Lei's shoulder. Smart children like you, as you grow up, will gradually realize how different you are. I went through the same thing. My job is to specifically help these unique individuals. If you ever feel lost, come find me. The doors of my institute are always open for you." Lei thanked him sincerely. After hearing this, the doctor kindly reminded her, "By the way, the Duke doesn't really care whether you're smart or not. He's so happy because he's proud of your talent." A big exclamation mark popped up on Lei's little head. How did you know what I was thinking? At the same time, her previous worry about not being smart enough and not being able to help her father now turned into secret joy. No wonder the Duke was so happy. It turns out he felt proud to have a daughter like me. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from outside the room, startling both of them. The Duke impatiently hinted, "You've been talking for so long, it's making me a bit suspicious."